That's right. Good afternoon, and thanks again for your patience and as we resume this hearing today on the committee funding for all of the committees. We are most appreciative for those chairpersons and ranking members who have come before us to give us their outline of their budget as well as their agenda. We have been quite impressed with what we have before us by way of Ways and Means. Of course, the votes delayed us from continuing, but at this time we would like to do just that. We have before us today the chairman of the Ways and Means, Mr. Rangel, and the ranking member, Mr. McCrary, to present their budget and their agenda. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And as you know, this is the first time I've had the honor to sit before you as you chair, and I just can't begin to tell you how proud I am to see you sitting there and how pleased we are to come before you in what we think has been put together a very modest budget in view of what the fiscal situation is in the House of Representatives. We have worked together in terms of trying to bring a bipartisan budget before you, and we've made the allocations that traditionally our committee has been able to do over the years. Previously, the minority was given 1/3. We will continue to do that. In terms of real dollars, the amount that we're proposing is still less than that of 1994. For year one, 2007, we proposed a 7% increase from 2006, which totals $9,785,128. For year two, we proposed a 5% increase from 2007, and for the total both years, 12.5. In the 104th Congress, our committee was cut by 37%, and that was the personnel was cut by more than half, and it was the only committee that survived that took a cut of that weight. We're asking for 6 additional staffers since both the minority and the majority agree that we can take on the problem of Social Security, taxes, to some extent health, and certainly trade. And we do intend, as the Speaker would want, for us to increase our oversight. And so we don't intend to be a traveling committee, but in view of the enlarged legislative agenda that we have assumed, we did put in some money for travel. I also would like to add, as most of the House knows, that the majority and the minority has started off this session in trying to see exactly what it is that we can accomplish where we do have agreements and not the extent of the disagreements that the parties and members of the committees have had in the past. And we're very pleased with the progress that we've made. And so the budget, as in other areas of the jurisdiction of the committee, I've worked very closely with Mr. McCrary, and I would like to yield to him at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member Ehlers, and members of the committee. I appreciate having the opportunity to appear this afternoon with Chairman Rangel in support of our budget proposal for the 110th Congress. I want to express my appreciation to Chairman Rangel for working with me and my staff as he developed the Ways and Means budget request. We were consulted in the preparation of the budget proposal, and under this budget, the minority has full control of 1/3 of the budget and resources. Both the chairman's and my staff have worked hard to ensure a smooth and seamless transition. Whether it was the logistics of moving office space, transferring computer files and equipment, or assigning parking permits, we were able to effectively coordinate so that the committee was prepared to begin working once Congress convened. I support the committee's budget proposal. An increase in our current budget will assist in providing the necessary resources needed to tackle the committee's historically aggressive agenda. It is consistent with the requested increases of the past several Congresses, and I should note was approved by our committee unanimously on January 17, 2007. Thanks again for the opportunity to testify, and I'd be pleased to respond to any questions you might have.
Thank you both so much for outlining your agenda and your budget. You both understand that we are in a position or an environment that is not conducive to increases beyond the very modest 2.4% that the appropriators and the Budget Committee have given us because of last year we did not have a budget passed. And because of that, we have had to operate from the baseline of last year's budget with just that mere increase, as I spoke to you, that would be 2.4%. And while we do recognize and appreciate the extraordinary services that you provide with the very talented personnel that you have, and as I looked back on my notes and looked at the subcommittee's oversight in terms of IRS operations, you're also looking at tax relief for individuals and families. Those are the things that the American people want us to look at and to do. And yet, in spite of all of that, we have such dismal budget constraints that at this time we are unable to provide anything other than that 2.4%. I am encouraged by your working with the ranking member, Mr. Chairman, and bringing about the 2/3, 1/3 agreement and commitment that has been set forth in the rules, and we're happy that you're working in a bipartisan way to do that. But we do not feel good about your personnel that was cut by more than half and your need for additional staff. Now, there are many committee chairpersons who've come before me today and asked and spoke about that, and spoke about if we don't do something about the staffing and about the salaries, we're going to lose out on these very professional, very talented people who will go elsewhere outside of this place to work, where they will have a salary conducive to their talent. And so I will be taking this back to the Speaker to talk with her. I can't guarantee you anything that will happen that will perhaps increase at this juncture, but what I will do is to report back as to the extraordinary work that you're doing. We understand your large legislative agenda and all of the other hearings that you've outlined here in your presentation, but in light of all of that, we're still unable to do at this time anything outside of that modest increase. And so with that, though, I will tell you that I will go to the Speaker to talk about this critical need for additional staff and what will happen in the long run if we do not at least address that issue. With that, I will then ask the ranking member for any comments that he might have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'm pleased to hear your reassurance you will honor the 1/3, 2/3. And we are getting that commitment out of every chairman and ranking member that come before us today, and we're doing it jointly because it was very hard to develop that. We developed it over the past 12 years. We're bound and determined to make sure the committees stick to that. One other thing, Mr. McCurry, it sounded from your comments as if this entire project of developing the budget was a joint effort between you and the chairman, and that you both worked closely together on it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That's a good model to follow, and we've heard from a few committees where, well, very few, but a few that do not follow that. But I think that's a good approach, and I commend Chairman Rangel for doing that as well. With that, I have nothing further to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ranking Member. Any member wishes to speak, to make any comments? Ms. Lofgren?
Madam Chairman, I just very quickly got to know Jim when we served for an endless number of years on the Ethics Committee together, and I know really the fine mind that you have, and it's great to see you working with the chairman, and I'm just so happy to sit here and be able to say, Mr. Chairman Rangel. It's it's a pleasure to follow our chair's lead, but really a pleasure to see you, Mr. Chairman, for the first time in this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Any other comments? If not, we will certainly do our due diligence in addressing and speaking to the speaker on the issue of staffing.
Well, because you've said that, Madam Chair Lady, I'd like to add something. And Zoe probably knew Jim McCrary better than I did because there was a different atmosphere in that committee. But I would like to say that I've come to know, respect, and look forward to working with him. In that connection, I'd like to say briefly, since you will be talking with the speaker, that she might as well know it, that Jim and I have been working very closely with the administration to see what areas of the big ticket items that we could possibly tackle to bring credit upon the Congress and certainly our committee. We haven't taken anything off the table, whether it's Social Security, trade, simplification of taxes, and even thought about touching some parts of health the best that we could. We also agreed that the issue that we look like we can get a handle on, the one we can get a consensus on, is going to be our priority. You can tell the speaker, I don't think we're going to be hitting successes in each one of those areas, but I can tell you one thing, that if it does happen, we won't be able to do it. As good as the staff is, each one of these problems that I mentioned are just tremendous in terms of size and what we'll have to do in terms of hearing. And so we're moving forward, but I somehow, and I don't know how it works since I'm new at this, but somehow I just can't believe that if we start moving on those issues, that the whole country's waiting to see movement, and that we've had none for a decade. And we also agreed that we are convinced that even if we're not successful, that at the end of this term, it's going to be much easier for those who follow us to know that these issues have to be dealt with no matter what the political pain is. So I appreciate that you're taking it back.
And I appreciate your comments. I have duly noted your comments now so that I can mention and speak with her on that, because those big ticket items that you talk about, we had not even gotten into that really fully, and yet they are upon you and your committee. So thank you so much. What I would like to reiterate is what the ranking member said, and it is very true. You have worked so well collegially with one another, and that is the beginning step of success on any committee. And so we thank you so much for the sharing of your budget, for the sharing of your in terms of speaking about personnel traveling or hearings or whatever. You have worked in concert, and that is to be commended, and we thank you so much for that, and thank you for coming before the committee today.
Thank all of you.
We would like to now call up Chairwoman Velasquez and the ranking member, Mr. Shabbat, from the Small Business. It is indeed a pleasure to have a woman at the helm of any committee, but it's certainly the Small Business, and appreciate the work that you have done in your position as ranking member, and now you have been honored, and we are honored by your being here. And we're also honored to have with us the ranking member, Mr. Shabbat. So, would you like to get started now, Madam Chairwoman?
Thank you, Madam Chair Melinda McDonough and Ranking Member Ehlers. I appreciate the opportunity today to come before the House Administration Committee and discuss the budget submission for the House Small Business Committee in the 110th Congress. The committee requests these funds to address the critical issues facing small businesses in this nation. With the help of Mr. Shabbat, the committee has already adopted an aggressive oversight plan that will significantly increase its legislative and oversight role. This budget submission was developed in full consultation with Mr. Shabbat's office. The committee seeks a 12% increase in funding from the last Congress. In terms of dollars, this increased request represents the third smallest of any of the committees. And I want to repeat that because I don't want for you to be impressed with the 12% request. But since 1994, basically, the budget of the Small Business Committee was decimated, and we are still trying to recover from the impact that that caused to the Small Business Committee. I would like to note that our committee will change how the funds are allocated to the minority. Unlike previous Congresses, the minority will have control of a full third of the budget, including travel, as opposed to just salary and personnel. I think it is important that Mr. Chabot and his staff have the flexibility to determine their spending priorities. The increase in funding is particularly necessary because of the committee's change in jurisdiction. When the House adopted its rule package this year, the Rules Committee made it clear that the Small Business Committee shall have an increased jurisdiction beyond the SBA and its programs. That means that the committee will consider issues such as technology, agriculture, and other legislation that have a significant impact on small businesses. To keep up with these issues, the committee has hired experts in the various areas to ensure the interests of entrepreneurs are protected. We are also seeking funds to provide dedicated staffing to assist the 5 subcommittees. They request 6 additional funding and 3 additional slots to have dedicated staff to assist the new subcommittee chairs. This budget would make sure that that happens. The committee also plans on holding a number of field hearings so that we can speak with small businesses directly. Millions of small businesses do not have the ability or their budget, their money, resources to express their concerns or to hire high-priced lobbyists to come before members of Congress. By doing hearings across the country, we will create the opportunity to have members listen to their concerns and identify ways to improve the business environment. The budget also incorporates the equipment needs of the committee. We requested a total of 8 new computers for 2007. Since this Congress started, we have already ordered 5 new computers to accommodate the staff. We will need at least 3 more new computers when we are fully staffed. The committee will also need a new copier. The main majority office is currently operating without one. I would also like to make mention of an item of importance that is not included in our committee's budget submission. The committee hearing room is in desperate need of major renovations. It badly needs upgrades to both the audiovisual system and the overall setup. The current setup is such that we can only have about half of the committee members seated at one time. In terms of technology, the audio system is virtually unworkable, and the room does not have the capacity to take advantage of new technologies. I will seek your assistance in helping address this problem. In conclusion, the committee plans on using the requested resources to conduct rigorous oversight and work on passing legislation that will improve this nation's economy. We have a number of important issues, which includes addressing the $12 billion of small business contracts being awarded to large companies, making sure that the federal marketplace is open for small businesses in America, improving oversight and making changes to the SBA disaster loan program, which failed during Hurricane Katrina. We will also undertake a major reauthorization of the Small Business Administration and its programs that have not been changed in over a decade. I appreciate your time and will be willing to answer any question that members of the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cabot.
Thank you, Chairwoman Melinda McDonald and Ranking Member Ehlers and the other members of the committee. I'm pleased to join my friend, the chair of the Small Business Committee, Ms. Velasquez, in submitting our committee funding request for the 110th Congress. As my colleagues know, the Small Business Committee receives the smallest allocation of any full committee and has historically received the lowest funding increase of any committee since the 104th Congress, or back in 1995. The chair of the House Administration Committee is, of course, a senior and respected member of the Small Business Committee and knows that our committee carries a full legislative load and will take on even more work this year as our jurisdiction expands. I believe the committee funding request is a fair one, and hope you will give it every consideration. I look forward to working with Chairwoman Velasquez in support of our nation's small businesses and with your distinguished committee as well as we move forward. I thank the chair and ranking member and all the other members of this committee, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you both so much for your great outline and presentation on small business. Of course, I sit on this committee, so I know the clarion call of this chairwoman when she was ranking member on the disproportionate way by which the budget was set. It has always had its lowest infusion of funding. However, we all recognize that there was not a budget passed last year. Therefore, we have to operate from the baseline of last year's budget and bring in the increase of about 2.2, 2.3%. Now, I will say this, the increase that we are giving all chairs is across the board, so you're not, that is no way diminishing your numbers in terms of the increase. But we do not have the propensity at this moment to do anything else because of the lack of funding that the appropriators and budget folks have disallowed. And so we understand, as you said, your main office is without a computer. Excuse me, did I hear you correctly on that? And that your hearing room does not have the capacity to seat all members at one time. Those are issues that I have asterisk so that I can look into those, although we know that space is a premium in this place, and that has been the cry from all chairpersons and ranking members that they need additional slots. You need 3 additional slots, as I've outlined here. And it is, you know, it has become quite problematic. We regret that we have to tell you this and wish that we could tell you something that has a much more rosy outcome, but that is the way we are. That's the position we're in with the CRS that went through.
Madam
CRA, yeah.
I will ask that when you discuss the budget submission with the speaker, that you take note to the fact that the Small Business Committee jurisdiction has been expanded. With that comes more responsibility, and therefore, in order for us to do our job, we should be given more consideration when it comes to the budget.
And I couldn't agree with you further. And of course, I am only a lone voice of many who go to the speaker, who goes to the speaker to talk with her. But I will carry that with me, knowing that you have always been, as one would say, shortchanged in terms of your budget. And from 1994, as you so eloquently outlined, that has been the impact on your budget. I was amazed and really quite pleased to know, though, you're bringing in agriculture, because one does not readily think small business agriculture, but it is definitely a fit. And plus, I'm also very much appreciative to you, Madam Chairwoman, because it seems like there was somewhat of a tug that you had when you were ranking member for the 2/3, 1/3 agreement. And you have done that in very open forum, and you have done that with ease. And so I applaud you on that, because Mr. Shabbat has worked very well with you and continue, I'm sure, to work well with you. And also the travel and personnel that you are expanding along that line.
Madam Chairwoman?
Yes, please.
I would just like to note that the chair has been very, very fair, very cooperative, and very gracious. The committee staff's working together, and the members as well. So we're very, very pleased with the working relationship that we have, and we have every reason to believe that it will continue.
Well, I tell you, you don't know that those are refreshing words coming from a ranking member, but then those are the words that we've heard all day today from ranking members. And so we have had at least the pleasantry of sitting here hearing that there's cooperation between the chairperson and the ranking member, and that's a good thing. So we thank you for that, and with that, I will turn it over to the ranking member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, let me join in congratulating you for working together in the budget, presenting it jointly. and appreciate that sort of cooperation. And I especially appreciate the two-third, one-third, because this committee worked very hard for a dozen years to establish that principle. And both the ranking member and I are committed to maintaining the two-thirds, one-third tradition. I just have a different question. What is the definition of small business now?
Well, you know, that is one of the issues that we still have pending with the Small Business Administration, given the fact that in the last 6 years, their budget has been cut by 40%. They don't have the manpower to be able to define what a small business is, because it has to be based on the different industries. What is for the restaurant industry is not for manufacturing and so on. So it is a kind of confusing, but we're trying to do our best.
Well, I appreciate that, and I was not trying to lay a trap. I'm curious because I've heard so many things over the years, and I think we all know and we all agree that small business is the greatest job creation that we have in this nation. And I think it's very important that we protect the small businesses. And perhaps maybe you can take on the issue of the estate tax as well, because it affects small businesses more than anyone else. Farmers, small businessmen, I hear it from them all the time. And so perhaps in your spare time you could work with Ways and Means and come up with a solution to that.
That is, if I may, that issue is part of our oversight plan. But let me just say, you know, every place you go or every person that you hear, they talk about how small businesses are the drivers of our economy. They create 80% of all new jobs. But when it comes to providing the resources for all to do the job of helping small businesses to do what they do best, and that is creating jobs, we need resources. With expanded jurisdiction, we want to go do field hearings. They don't have the resources that would allow for them to pay lobbyists to come and talk to us. So it is great if we could do field hearings across America, rural America and urban America. We go and we listen to them.
Yeah. Thank you. I yield back.
Well, I must say that America is waiting for small businesses to come across the country because they do want to hear from you and want to really have you hear from them. You're absolutely right. Everyone talks about small businesses being the engine, and yet they do nothing about it, so that's what we call double talk. And I'm sure you two are about fed up with the double talk and want something other than that and want something productive. Are there any other members who would like to? Ms. Lofgren?
Madam Chairman, I just wanted to, I've never served on this committee, but I've heard a lot about it from the now chairwoman. I do congratulate her and the ranking member who I've served with for 13 years on the Judiciary Committee. I'm confident that you'll have a good Congress working together. I just, not having served on the committee, I'm struck by the comments, and I do remember that there was not necessarily as pleasing a relationship in the last hearing as we see here today, and I'm glad that you have established what we think is the right thing, which is the minority gets their third, and they get to control their third, and that's the way it should be, and I compliment you for living up to that, even though there were some issues about that when you were in the minority. On that, I mean, we understand that there is a limit, Madam Chairwoman, of 2%, but if a committee such as this one, really was down unusually low, I would certainly support your efforts to make some kind of accommodation for that, because doing it across the board when there was something weirdly low to begin with doesn't seem exactly right, and more than just right, it defeats our mission, which is, you know, I just know from my own area, and I'm sure this is true across the country, there's some oversight that needs to be done on these SBA programs and small businesses that aren't necessarily getting what we think they're getting, and I think that both the chairwoman and the ranking member would want to do that, because it's, I mean, this is not a partisan issue. This is about the small business people of America. So I just wanted to support whatever efforts you make to get a little bit of a bigger bump up in this. I mean, the idea that you don't have enough room for every member of the committee to sit, I mean, how can that be acceptable? So I would think some adjustment would need to be made. I thank the gentlelady, the chairwoman for.
And I thank the gentlelady for her comments, duly noted. I think that is something an issue that we should look into and address to the speaker. When I go, I'll have a long laundry list of things that the speaker at least will hear me out. Any other persons to speak to this? Yes, Mr. First, Ms. Davis.
Just very quickly, Madam Chair, the continuity that we spoke about in other committees, it certainly would apply here as well. I would be just interested in knowing whether it's been tougher to keep some of your staff, partly because you may not be accommodating them as well as some other committees. Has that been a problem?
No, basically my staff and the staff that was serving with me before still remain, yes, with us.
So they're loyal.
Yes,
they're loyal, and they also care about
They are loyal, but there is a point where, you know, the private market
exactly
there is seeking for people with the type of expertise and knowledge that they have.
Right, and we all rely upon that as well. Certainly in the Armed Services, the Department of Defense, we deal with contract bundling all the time and the importance of bringing in small business. So I appreciate the work that you all are doing, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Davis. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman, and I apologize for getting here late. But quickly, I just wanted to add my own observations, having served on small business when I first got to Congress and having rejoined recently. It is an important committee whose work has been neglected, and I believe this, and I don't mean to sound partisan, because I believe that you would have members on both sides of the aisle agree with the observation that the bulk of the work, of course, has to do with the Small Business Administration and the many programs that are dedicated to the proposition that small businesses are important and we should support them to the extent and degree that we must in order to have a robust economy. However, Small Business Administration has truly been the stepchild of the administration, in my opinion. If you look at the declining budgetary dollars, declining emphasis on the programs and so on, this is not to lay the blame at anybody. We need to fix the problem, and I know that the ranking member joins the chairwoman in that endeavor. So I'd like to associate my comments with those made earlier by Congresswoman Lofgren. If at all possible, and I know we've had other chairs and ranking members come before us, but if we look at small business and look at the present situation being experienced, if there's anything that we can do to assist them, again, just in the way of resources and maybe even facilities or what, to meet the tremendous burden and challenges that they actually face. And with that, I thank you, and I thank the chairwoman and the ranking member, Mr. Shapiro.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And your notes, your words were duly noted. It does seem as earlier, the chairwoman said, and has been reiterated, that if you have a hearing room without the capacity to seat the panel, the members, I think that in and of itself is something to be looked at. Mr. Ranking Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, in your introductory statement, Madam Chair, you made the comment, you took a big jolt some years ago and we're trying to get back up. And I didn't realize the jolt was that big until I looked at the chart and saw it, and my staff verified this. 103rd Congress, you were at $5,775,000 and some change. And under this proposed new budget, you'll be at $5,965 and change. This means that for next year, it'll be the first time that you are getting more money than you did in 103rd Congress. So it took you only 14 years to recover from the cut. I think you can make a pretty strong case. If not, we're limited this year because of the lack of appropriations, but you may be able to make a case with the speaker that you should get plussed up a little bit. Thank you.
Only a physicist would be able to look at that. Thank you both so very much for being here today, and we look forward to working with you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
The next panel, Chair and Ranking Member we have here is Chairman Filner, and Ranking Member Bullier from the Veterans Affairs. If I'm not mistaken, you were the next. No? No, 'cause they was here before that, though. It is my understanding that they were the next ones here. We're trying to make sure that we give time. They were, okay, fine. Thank you both for being here. Good afternoon to you. And it's a pleasure to have you come before the committee to speak on your budget as well as the great work that you do and are doing for our veterans. I can't think of a committee that is much more worthy to be praised, if you will, than that of our Veteran Affairs. And so we are very pleased with the work that you do. We welcome you. And Mr. Chairman, if you want to get started.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's nice to see you in the chair's position.
Thank you.
And all my California colleagues here.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you've had such unity.
We've let a few of the others come forward.
So glad you had so much unity up to now, because I think Mr. Booyer and I have not come to an agreement on our personnel budget, but we'll get into that. I think our budget, my full statement is submitted to you. I'm just going to say a few words. It's a fairly simple budget. I heard some of the other chairs asking for more. What we're doing is, of course, we assume a flat line for '07, and we have the exact same personnel and administrative budget distributed in the exact same way as occurred in the previous Congress. We were tasked, I think we were said we might get a 2 to 4% increase for next year. I kept hearing 2% when I've been here. We assumed a 4% and just raised everything 4%. Over 90% of our budget is obviously in personnel, and the rest in travel and IT, printing, those kinds of things. So clearly, we have to stay the same for '07. We projected the 4%, and it's that simple, or that for you. There will be, I would like to reserve the right to just answer any questions that Mr. Booyer raises, but again, our staff slots, our personnel, everything stays the same, and with a percentage increase for fiscal '08. And that would conclude my remarks, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bullier.
Thank you, ma'am. Representing this nation's veterans is a very important job. So first I must say, you'll make me feel very comfortable if you'll have your staff take the United States flag and place it in its proper position on the right side behind you.
You're absolutely right, and so
thank you.
that's the first order of business after all of this is over today. Thank you.
I wish I could sit here with envy as I listen to the testimony of the others come before you and talk about their warm and gracious working relationship that they had. I cannot testify that we have that at all. I cannot concur with the proposed budget at all. I was not consulted. When I had heard that Mr. Filner wanted to adopt the very same budget that Lane Evans and I had come up with before, I said, even though I was at home, still on drugs, recovering from surgery, I called Bob to try to explain to him what the rationale was for that budget. I don't believe he was in a very good listening mode and said, that's our budget and that's the way it's going to be. The first time the two of us had an opportunity to sit down and discuss was about 2 hours ago, and it was not one of the more pleasant meetings I've ever had here in Congress. And so it is with a heavy heart that I have to testify and non-concur. Because the Veterans Affairs Committee is one of the greatest committees you can serve on in this Congress. And I've made a plea to Bob that, if we can't even agree on the simplicity of a budget between us, how are we going to work on the big issues? And this committee, let's throw it on the table here. I mean, there was some, the Republican leadership put a squeeze on the Veterans Affairs Committee when they had some challenges with Chris Smith. And then when I became the chairman, I said, I will accept this chairmanship, but you need to make an investment in the infrastructure because it is lagging very far behind, Chairwoman. And this committee did that. And I didn't get it all in '05, but they did it in '06. And so when Jim Hawley, who was the staff director for the minority, and Lane Evans, what we decided to do is that we would sacrifice on the personnel side to make all the investment in our infrastructure. And we did that. So you gave us the money to do that. We made huge investments. You name it, from laptops to servers to printers to even have our offsite. It is where it needs to be. And so to say, well, the budget for which I'm asking the testimony, I wrote down the words, is the exact disbursement the same as in the last Congress. That's not accurate at all. Because even there were some payments that I took on out of my personnel side that now it's slipped into the other services. It is accurate to say that the number that the minority is receiving is the exact same number that the minority received in January of '06. That's correct. And the Democrat majority is saying we're living under the exact same personnel number as the Republican majority in '06. That is correct. But what has been broken here is when Lane Evans and I agreed to make all this investment in infrastructure to then sacrifice on personnel, it's hard for me to say, what are you going to do with all now the extra money? And there's some pain involved at this committee at the moment. There is real pain at our committee. The pain is there because you, the Democratic caucus, went through a fight with regard to who would be the chairman of the committee. And Lane Evans supported Mike Michaud. So anybody who was hired by Lane Evans that supported Mike Michaud, they're gone. So the senior experienced leadership out of the Veterans Affairs Committee is gone. People that I've known and worked with for the entire time I've been here are gone. So it's very easy for Mr. Filner to testify and say, well, I don't need any of that. Well, yeah, these people have been gone. You've been operating under a shoestring. But we on the minority side, sure, we pared down, but we still have pain. And it's time to hold to that deal and move to the personnel side. If you actually disperse extra dollars to the committee, how do I have any faith that the chairman's even going to turn it to personnel? And what's he going to hold it on to? When Lane and I said, well, we'll put money into travel, really, the travel thing never even got utilized because in the VA, we travel on the VA's dollar, like what you do on the Armed Services Committee with the DOD paying for it. So we've got $50,000 lying in that account. And Mr. Filner wants to go to the Philippines on that money. I'm challenged. And I'm very disturbed that I have to be here and non-concur, because this is supposed to be one of the most bipartisan committees. And if we cannot even agree on a committee budget, I'm going to use your words, it's the starting point. And those are the words that I also shared with Mr. Filner. They are the starting point. And if we can't even agree to this budget, how are we going to agree on the big issues? So it's a heavy heart that I have right now.
Madam Chair, if I may respond.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I too am grieved that we haven't come to agreement on this. I guess he blames it on me and I blame it on him. But the real issue, Madam Chair, is as we were given a flatline budget. Mm-hmm. We consulted with the previous staff and all the paperwork which we have submitted to you. And we just said, we'll divide it up the way it was before, which is exactly what we did, divide up the personnel budget and the services budget exactly as it was before. Apparently, because there was pain on the minority side, they had to cut their staff in half. His upper staff was paid at very high levels. So he could not fit his staff into the budget that was given to us the previous year and he had before. So he wanted more money, and I said, well, we have to live within our budget. And then he claimed that, well, we really had the minority really had $50,000 more, which is what we want. And it turned out that at the end of the budget year, the staffs agreed on a bonus procedure. The majority at the time got $100,000, the minority got $50,000, and the staff distributed bonuses. I don't, you know, I don't have any, I didn't have any say in that. I didn't know what was going on. But we don't know whether we'll have that surplus in all our personnel budgets. If we have surplus, we like to reward staff who have done better, or we have paid them low because of our budget. And so that could be distributed in bonuses at the end of the year. But we don't know that at this point. I don't know the problem except that he's overpaying his staff, and he wants us to cover that. And I don't think that's our role, certainly at the beginning of a budget year, to say that we're going to exceed our budget. The fiscal conservative minority is not being too fiscal conservative at this point.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me like there has to be a starting point here. We're not going to be pointing fingers back and forth. What we're trying to do here now is trying to help resolve this issue. Both of you know that your committee is extremely important. As I look at some of the itinerary on your committee, you're going to be investigating the status of veterans' benefits. You're going to be investigating the National Cemetery Systems operation. You're going to be looking at the National Veterans Service Organization conventions and investigate Veterans Health Administration network impact. Those are very critical issues that's confronting the two of you leaders. Not to mention Walter Reed has now come upon us, and we must look at that. We cannot talk about what is in the past, whatever that may have been, and whichever side was advantaged by that or not. What we've got to do is move forward. And going forward, it is my suggestion as we try to wrap this up, present a resolution on the floor, because we are late in getting this committee budget into resolution form to present to the floor so that we can then be in regular order, if you will, at least begin to present the committees with their funding so that they can move on their issues and their initiatives. It would be my suggestion that the two of you talk. It seems like that is the lacking thing that has happened here, that you have not sat and talked about what you do have. And when I hear, well, I don't know, I'm not sure what's going on, that is a clear indication that communication has broken down. I would suggest to you that you do communicate with each other. Good, strong leadership can disagree on many things, but agree on one thing, and that is your budget. So I would suggest to you, if I might do that, is that the two of you please get together on your budget so that we can then move forward in solidifying this resolution with the Veterans Affairs budget on it or in it, signifying that the two of you have come together with an agreement to provide. Now, I think you have the 2/3, 1/3. Am I correct on that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But you have a travel, you have funding from a travel that was never taken of $50 grand. Am I correct on that? That is correct?
Madam Chair, that is, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
I was not ranking member when this previous budget was drawn up. I'm now chairman. We looked at our needs. The VA told us that they would not be covering the travel, as they apparently did in the past. I don't know what happened. So we had to build in our travel expenses. And I would not like you to take away from the testimony, the characterization that we have not communicated. Mr. Bouyer is just wrong in the number of times that we talked. We talked several times. But our staff has been in communication for hours and hours on this. We have a basic disagreement. He wants more money than the budget allows us to do. It's as simple as that. And so I'm not sure, he hasn't come up with any compromise. He hasn't come up with any suggestions. He just said, I want the $50,000 because that's what you had last time.
Well, let me ask you.
Let
me ask you, Mr. Chairman, have you come up with any type of conciliatory agreement here, that's why I'm saying communication here,
Right.
is
We
because
said that, again, we're starting with the exact same budget we started, as Mr. Booyer said. And when we come to all these other expenses, if we don't need the money for travel, if we don't need the money for copiers, if we don't need the money for computers, then we have some money to talk about. We don't know that at the beginning of the fiscal year.
And this is the very reason why you should be communicating, because whether or not the Veterans Affairs Department or the Secretary of Veterans Affairs or whomever has cut off your travel, you might want to go to them and see why they've done that, and there could be an explanation that clears all of that. All I'm saying to you is that we certainly don't want you to go away from here with the misunderstanding of understanding the issue. And the issue is that the two of you must come together in agreement for this budget to work, and you must come together in order for us to move the resolution for final passage.
Madam Chair,
on the
do I
floor.
understand the rules of the House such that in the event that the minority does not meet the budget that is given in the resolution, does the chairman have the authority to take steps that will put that staff into budget compliance? We checked with the parliamentarian, we checked with the rules of the House, and I think the chair has that authority. I just want to make that clear.
It could be that understanding, Mr. Chairman. The thing of it is, though, we're working outside of a budget for this committee, and this committee has, the functionality of this committee is to have a budget and to work within that budget. I would say to you that in having not met with this type of issue before, but I clearly do understand in personnel management that I've had that in order to resolve this, the two of you must come to the table to resolve this. It cannot be resolved in this committee. It has to be resolved between the two of you. And the two of you, in my opinion, I think would like to get this over and done with so that we can put you in this resolution and move forward in submitting this resolution.
Madam Chairwoman, I don't permit anything like this to defocus my job in serving the nation's veterans. But you just got a flavor of what I'm dealing with. An insult to my staff saying that they're overpaid. And then when I turn and ask his staff a particular question, he turns and says, you don't have to respond to him. So when you're saying, Steve, get together, work these things out, I want you to know that I have made that effort. And, you know, I can't talk to a wall. I don't know what to do. If anybody can help me here, help me. I'd be more than happy to. I want to get on with business.
Madam Chairman, could I ask a question?
Yes, but I need to go to the ranking member, if you don't mind, Ms.
Oh, of
Lofgren,
course. I'm
and
sorry.
then, please, protocol, and then I'll get to you. Mr. Ellers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Seems about every 4 years we have a dust-up like this on one committee or another. And the
Well,
business...
I've been here, and I didn't see the dust, Mr. Ellers.
Yeah.
But and obviously we can't get into a refereeing situation here in this committee, but it is our responsibility to try to make sure that you get this resolved because we have to put some numbers in. And it seems to me the basic difference here, you're meeting the 2/3, 1/3, but the factor that's not included in that, I believe, is the agreement that Mr. Boyer had with the previous chairman, or I'm sorry, the previous ranking member, resolving on replacing equipment and building up the infrastructure of the office. I mean, given that there should be very little need in the budget to do that this year, and perhaps there's some money there that could be used to ameliorate the situation.
Mr. Ehlers, that's an assumption that Mr. Booyer made. We haven't made that decision yet. We don't know that
No,
all
I'm
those...
not saying you've made a decision. I'm
No,
just saying...
but you're telling me that we don't have any equipment needs. We don't know that, and you don't know that.
No, I don't. I'm speculating.
So there's...
I'm simply saying that that issue here is really what the result of that agreement with Mr. Lane is. I'm sorry, Mr. Evans. And I don't know. I'm just saying that has to be part of the discussion. But as I say, I'm not, we can't referee this. We are going to have to end up putting something in then, in the resolution that goes before the House. The other factor that I want to mention is what especially concerns me is not getting agreement on such an important issue. And by that I mean important to so many veterans in this country. It's something that you simply have to get an agreement on. And if it's impossible for you or your staff to work out an agreement, then try to involve the good judgment of the minority leader and the speaker, and have some of their staff meet with you, ascertain the facts, try to help you get an agreement, or if there's someone else that you want to pull in from the outside. But it seems to me that you're not too likely to get agreement between the two of you in the short time we have before we have to present a resolution to the floor. So I think the 2 points I'm making are simply very simply. One is that the agreement with the previous chair has to be factored into the discussion. And secondly, I hope you can resolve this between the two of you in some friendly fashion. With that, I will yield back.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I was just getting counsel on the committee to talk with me, and Mr. Chairman, your question is whether or not you can be permissible to authorize your full budget to the committee for functionality without having the minority to approve it. Am I kind of in the ballpark of that? When you said that you would, the rules and the parliamentarian have both ruled on this?
No, I said if their salary, their monthly salary allocations come to me for my signature, and they are above the budget that they have been given, then I have no choice but to reduce those salaries to the existing budget.
The extra $50,000 that I gave to the Democrats in December, I used that in the calculation of the 1/3, 2/3.
But you see, now the chairman would have the authority to reduce that to be within the construct of the budget and what he's talking about. The $50,000 that you talk about, Mr. Boulier, I'm not sure. Is that still money that is in this committee? That you say you gave $50,000 back to the Democrats?
Yes, I did, in addition. So, I mean, if you were to say, all right, Steve, what was the allocation majority and minority in 2007, I don't know what the final number was. He wants to use the number that was given in the January of '06. See, at the end of the year, I mean, I had Jim Lairvere back here, Marine Colonel, went to Afghanistan. So we had some extra dollars, and I moved those dollars, $50,000, over to the Democrats in December, and then other dollars were allocated to the majority. I don't even know how they broke out.
Can I ask a question?
So the question that you just asked is because what I tried to share with Bob is that, Bob, what Vern just hit on the head, when Lane and I said we're going to spend the money on infrastructure and sacrifice on personnel, it was now time to move it back to the personnel column. I said, I've got this extra $50,000 I already gave the minority. I'm going to use that in the calculation. That's why he's now asking the question, saying, well, I guess what I'll do to Boulier now is I'll really hammer him. I'll go in there and fire somebody on his staff, and I'll get him to his number. That's really going to be pleasing to relations, doesn't it? But that's the purpose of his question to you.
I'm not sure of that, but I am sure that the chairman does have control of that budget at all times. And the $50,000 that you gave back to him, coupled with the travel funding of $50,000 that is still in there, there has to be some type of an agreement that you can work together to try to find common ground. Ms. Lofgren?
May I ask, this isn't making sense to me, I'm afraid, because we're in the 110th Congress. We start new in the 110th Congress. And, I mean, unfortunately, apparently the chairman and ranking member are not singing Kumbaya right now. Maybe that will change. We hope it will. But we've seen that before. I mean, in the last Congress, some of the chairman and ranking members didn't hit it off either. And you hope that that doesn't happen, but sometimes it does happen. And when that happens, the default position is the minority's entitled to 1/3. And the position, and this didn't always happen in the 109th Congress, but it was supposed to happen, that not only the minority is entitled to 1/3, and they're entitled to control 1/3, not to have to go and beg the chairman for their 1/3. They should have their 1/3, and they get to control their 1/3. So the question is the minority being given 1/3 and control of 1/3 of the whole budget?
No. 1/3 of the personnel part of the budget.
Personnel budget.
Right.
And
Which is exactly the way it was done for the last decade or more.
that may be, but that's not the way it's supposed to be.
out.
No, it wasn't.
Well, you know, I actually chastised some of the Democratic ranking members in the last set of hearings because I think that it really works better personally for the minority to control its own budget. But some of the ranking members, you know, made deals with the chairman and did other things. And I guess if there's a deal that people want to make, you know, you can't disrupt it. But
It's not just a question of deals, Ms. Lofgren. It's, for example,
Well,
we have a couple,
accommodations.
as I understand, IT people. Those are shared expenses that come out of they don't
Right.
come out of the personnel. They come out of the administrative part of the budget. So we're sharing that because the computers are all.
Right.
So, you know, it's not a question black and white of
Right.
who has control. There are all kinds of expenses that the committee as a whole has.
Right.
And so
the committee room and the furniture and
Exactly.
the like.
Exactly.
But most of the things that I was concerned about in the last Congress were ranking members who really had made, I think, significant accommodations that I wouldn't have made, but I guess it was up to them to make. That's not the case here. I think personally that putting aside things that can't be divided, such as your IT professional that's going to be in the best possible Silicon Valley way, a geek and nerd and not really hopefully a member of any political party, but anything that's really substantive where you two may not agree, there really does need to be the 1/3, 2/3, I think, throughout the whole
I mean, if that was looked at exactly, and 1/3 of the IT budget, I'm not sure they could do their stuff because, I mean, it is a whole.
Well, I guess part of what, I mean, if you could agree, or maybe we'll have to agree for you, that there are some things that are so nerdish that you have to say they're shared, like the IT guy.
Right.
But
But
the
what
other
we said is
stuff-
92% of the budget is personnel.
Well,
So that's 1/3, 2/3, and that all full control
I guess
over
in
it.
the chair, I had understood from the written material that it was 1/3, 2/3 completely. So maybe we do need some more illumination on this. And I thank both the chairman and ranking member for their
Thank you so
courtesy in
much, Ms.
answering.
Lofgren. The
Chairwoman.
one thing for sure, if this is not resolved, we can then exclude this committee from the resolution, and you can go to the floor with your argument and see how that comes out. That's the one thing. If I'm hearing correctly, at the end of the year that we're speaking of, the 2006 year, there was $150,000 that was not spent. $100,000 went to Mr. Boulier for staff bonuses. The $50,000 was given to Mr. Filner.
No, not to, it was given to the Democratic staff.
Was given to the
for bonus.
Democratic
I was not
staff.
the ranking member
At that time.
I had no knowledge of this, and I suspect Mr. Evans didn't either.
He did.
If there's funding left, who should accept the 1/3 if there's funding left over? Who should then accept the 1/3 of that funding?
I'm sorry? If there's money at the end of the budget
Yeah.
year? Well, then we'll get together and figure out how to use that. But
And-
obviously, we're at the beginning of the year. The budget is a planning document. A budget is taking into account the best estimate you have at this time of personnel and travel and copy and IT and all that. And we made, what we did, because we're under a CR, is we just said, okay, we'll start with the same planning document that we did last year when we were in the minority. And we have the exact same planning document to start with. We don't know how it'll end yet. We just are in the first month.
No funding is left over from that year, Mr. Filner.
I don't know of any. I don't know how, if there was, if we could use any, but nobody told me there was any budget left over.
May I ask a question?
So so you're not sure whether there were funding left over for that year?
Does committee funding
It
move
really
over
cannot.
from year to
without-
year? I don't know.
No, it cannot.
So
Cannot.
there is no money, but,
So
so
there
they
is no
used it for
money
staff
left.
bonuses.
So the 50,000 that we're talking about that was transferred over really is no money at all because
Well,
that's
exactly.
been resolved here.
Exactly.
All right, fine.
What would be the number of the available dollars? You said that would be split among the committees to an allocation. What is the number to the Veterans Affairs Committee?
You mean in dollars and cents or the
Dollars and
percentage?
cents.
Well, I would have to
Would you,
calculate that out, but
somebody have that in a chart?
I have a chart here with me stating how much you will be getting for this year, given the 2.3 inflation, and that's 3.5 million and some odds dollars, and that's what you are getting for the 2007 year.
So if that allocation, let me just throw this out because you could be really helpful. If that, any allocation over and above on the budget from which Mr. Filner has presented to this committee is allocated to personnel, that goes a long way in helping resolve this. If you're looking for areas, grounds of compromise, where you can move forward, I just throw that out on the table. I have no idea what Mr. Filner would feel about it or what his ideas would be.
Mr. McCarthy wants to speak. Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple questions. I'm a freshman, but I used to be the leader in State Assembly, and I'd negotiate all the money for all of our committees. So my only recommendation, one thing I would say, I had some very heated debates, but once we got the budget done, I found we agreed on a lot more things on the floor that we came to a much better agreement. But my one question for the Chairman Filner. Are you doing any evaluation currently on what your needs will be for computers and others?
Of course.
And how far along and when will that be done?
Well, we've looked at we've made an initial assessment that things are not as I heard described by Mr. Booyer, that is, we don't need to have any more needs. But that process is ongoing. It should be done soon.
How soon? I mean, is there a...
Let me just ask my staff director if I may.
Okay.
Could I respond for a second?
I'm going to come to you in 1 second.
All right.
To whom are we waiting for an
He's
answer
just
here?
getting,
Oh.
he's getting his answer right there.
If no other members
In
want to...
in our statement that I had provided you in...
I got it right here.
On page
You have
5
some
and
in the
6,
back.
it says equipment, and we talk about our 2-year plan and document management system, replacement 1/3 of the hardware, et cetera, update the computer software. So that was included in the budget that we gave to you.
So you're done with your assessment then? Because I do see in here computers and stuff, so...
Yeah.
I just
I mean,
wondering...
there's decisions, for example, it turns out, I didn't know it, that the committee does not have an IQ, is not on the same system as the rest of the House in terms of its software. It's hard to, they're not on the quorum system. We have to decide whether to make that change or not. I mean, those kinds of decisions have not been made.
Okay, maybe I'm not asking properly. You tell me. I'm just wondering, in part of the debate I heard, you said, as you referred back to ranking member here, you weren't sure yet because you don't know what the needs are on computer. In here, I read equipment needed. So I'm just wondering, is there an ongoing assessment? If there is, when will the date be there?
We made our assessment. There are changes that occur. The whole point of a budget is you make an estimate, and then things change. Salary savings may occur.
I understand
Computer
that.
savings may occur. Software savings may, we don't know. So we did our best judgment of what our needs are, and then we evaluate those periodically.
Yeah, I don't
like
mean
any
to
other
upset
manager
you.
might.
Maybe I'm not asking properly to you. I'm just responding to something I heard from you. I'm wondering, are you doing an assessment currently? Because that's what I thought I heard. If I heard differently, just tell me. And I'm just wondering, is that coming? Earlier you said yes, and it's going to be done soon. I'm just wondering, is there a date set, or if it's not, just say no.
I don't know what you heard. The statement, we have made a preliminary assessment of our software and hardware needs. That's in the statement I gave you.
Oh, so you're done with your assessment?
Yeah, well, it's always ongoing. You know that. I mean, things change. You make your best statement at the beginning of the budget year, and then you constantly reevaluate.
Okay.
I mean, what is the budget process in your personal office? The same exact thing. We decide what we think we need, and then it turns out we should have bought 2 computers, and we didn't, so we got to make some changes.
Well, we have him here, Mr. McCarthy. Have you finished?
Yes. No, I have them there. I have some more questions, if I may.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Can I respond to that then?
Yes, please.
I believe Lane Evans and I fulfilled our obligation to this committee when we testified for those dollars. We spent $206,754.04. We bought 4 printers, a lease on a backup server, purchased 8 laptops, leased 12 laptops, and leased a copier. That was $60,000 in 2005. In 2006, we did a lease buyout package that terminated the lease on the backup server. Knowing that I'm going to the minority, I bought out all the leases. I wanted to leave whoever the next chairman was going to be in the best position. So we bought 20 desktops, 5 laptops for the alternate site, 16 portable drives, 1 medium-duty copper, 15 Blackberries, 9 label printers, CMS upgrades, an additional server, backup power station for servers. The total buy, $206,000+. That's a lot of money.
You actually answered my question. How much did you
when he
spend?
said, well, it's in our budget, here's what's happening. Come on. When he presents it and says, here's what our
Wrap it
assessment
up here,
is,
gentlemen.
there's a pad number. He pads it. So you pad it 13,000 on anticipated equipment for 08. And then he pads another one over here by 10,000. That's a 23,000 pad. Now, why would you do a 23,000 pad? Those are the numbers that Lane and I talked about, that as we go into the next year, those dollars are there for the personnel because we'd sacrificed on the personnel side. So, Madam Chairwoman, your words to me, I embrace. The challenge for which we face, we need that additional staff to do the job, to take care of these veterans and do the investigations. So I am really perplexed. We come to the committee, we ask for additional monies to do all these upgrades in infrastructure, sacrifice on personnel, and now it's time to do the personnel to take care of veterans, and I can't get access to the dollars. Mr. McCarthy, that's my challenge.
So you spent $206,000 last time on equipment, and then
That would be 0506.
Okay. Then my only question, Madam Chair, I guess a parliamentary inquiry. Does this committee have the jurisdiction and power to set their budget?
We only set the aggregate dollar amount that you see here. We cannot decipher just what, in terms of incrementally or itemization of what they need. That is the chairperson along with the ranking member. Mr. McCarthy, I think we have exhausted this to the level that, as we see it, monies that is being requested is money that is in the new budget to bring back to do something that was done in 2006 or whatever. I'm not sure that can be done. The $50,000 that was given, money now, money does not go over, so we're talking about all new money going forward. And money going forward is that of the outline that we have here and the money that I've just given you. And so I'm not sure whether or not any other funding that you're requesting for any other reason can come from one pot or the other unless the two of you sit and talk about that. But that is new money. It's not old money. You have no old money. Lane Evans and nobody else can bring back any money that was once here. We do not have any more money. Now, if you want to conclude,
if I can just conclude, I think the way I hear it is not that the minority is saying there's any money left over. I think what the word I heard was the budget's being set with what the January money, not with what was truly set between the minority and majority at the end of the day. And the only concern that I would have, and I don't want to put any words in anyone's mouth, so I would just ask the chairman. The question from Ms. Lofgren was, at the end of the day, if money's left over, is that split 1/3, 2/3? Would that be, or no?
We haven't come to that situation. They decided to split the money personnel-wise. I mean, if we decide we have money that we can do extra stuff with, it could be personnel, it could be equipment, It could be either of those. Those decisions are way down the line.
Okay.
See, they made the decision, 11 months down the line for that. I don't know what's going to occur based.
But in your mind, if there's money left over, it's not 1/3, 2/3, it's negotiated. I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm just asking.
If we decide it goes to personnel, it's 1/3, 2/3.
If you decide. Okay, thank you.
First of all, there's no money left over. Let's make sure we define that. That is no money left over.
What he's claiming,
You start anew with new, fresh money. There's no money that's left over from the year prior to this year.
we know that.
So you go forward with your new budget funding.
We know that.
And it is predicated on what you and the chair wish to have as your priorities in terms of personnel, travel, equipment, whatever. But there is nothing that was once in 206 that we're operating in 207 with now. That is not. What it seems to me like you're saying that given that this money was given back to the minority back in 2006, that money that is represented there should be what is now presented in the new budget. That is not the way that goes. What does go, though, is the notion that we cannot continue to dwell on this. What I would recommend, as when I was ranking member before, we had a situation like this. I would like to ask if we can get financial experts to sit with the two of you to try and resolve this issue with you so that we can move forward with a budget that will be amenable to the two of you with two different outsiders independently coming together to work with you.
I accept anybody.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm perfectly willing to do that. As I said, we were perfectly willing to talk of this before. There's a mischaracterization of those.
Then I will take back my
And,
mischaracterization
Wallace.
that you're not communicating, but from what I see today, maybe there's another definition for this. So I will say that simply, you have not resolved the issue.
Correct.
And the issue has to be resolved. And so I'm asking, Mr. Chairman, are you willing to?
I'm willing. Again, you said the situation was not resolved. I presented the committee budget as is it my responsibility to do. It's resolved as far as I'm concerned. If somebody has a different suggestion for me, I'll be glad to take it. But we were asked to come to you with a budget. We did. It was exactly the same as last year's. And there's a disagreement. Well, that doesn't mean there's no communication. Disagreement just means disagreement. And your committee has the ability to take my budget and pass it or not. So, I'll be happy to talk further if that's what you would advise me as the chair.
All I'm
telling you is that I gave you the budget that our committee decided upon.
What I'm saying to you, Mr. Chairman, is that typically the budgets that we put in the resolution are budgets that have been agreed upon by both the chair and the ranking member. There is some disagreement here somewhere. Now,
but it's possible disagreements are never resolved, right?
but in this case, we have to come to some resolution.
Yeah.
This one, we must come to some resolution.
Your recommendation is very good.
May I then ask the two of you to meet with me and the ranking member after we've seen all chairs today?
I accept.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I would be happy to do that. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Ma'am?
I'm sorry, Mr. Gonzalez, I'm sorry.
Just a second, because I'm new to this committee, and the first thing is, what are the options? What can we do? Because maybe Mr. Filner's right. This is the budget, and either you live with it or don't. We approve it or we don't approve it. I think I heard the chairwoman indicate, though, that we can excise this from the resolution and go to the full floor and let the whole country see this, which I don't think you really want the whole country to see this. But I do think there's something fundamentally wrong here, and I'm trying to see if I get this right. And I'm not sure, Steve. Again, I don't want to misinterpret or mischaracterize anything. But are you asking Bob to abide by an agreement in the terms of which he was not a party? He's the chairman now. As a matter of fact, he's not even coming as the new ranking member. He's coming in as the chairman. There's a new majority. So I think we have to respect that. So I don't know if you had agreements with Lane or whatever, But I think the chairwoman has indicated we're starting totally anew, and whatever agreements may have been reached in the past with a different member of the Democratic Party, at that time the ranking member, I can understand Bob's position. But by the same token, this is not a divorce. And you guys are going to stay married at the end of this whole process. You're going to have to live with each other. It'd be great if it was a divorce, because then we would split up the goodies and y'all can go your separate ways. But you really do have to work. And I respect both of y'all. I know both of y'all. We have served on the same committee, Steve, for a number of years, and Bob's a personal friend. I just, again, embracing the spirit that is being demonstrated by all members here on both sides of the aisle or the dais, is to come together on this thing. Surely y'all can come to some agreement. And the thing is, though, Steve, again, you understand that Bob probably would not be bound. No one wants to be bound by an agreement reached by someone else, a third party, and I think I understand that. Am I wrong in that assumption?
But the real challenge when I first spoke with Bob is he said, Steve, I'm taking the budget that you and Lane had last year. And that's when I said, wait a minute, you don't have, would you like to know how Lane and I came up, and the rationale why we came up with that budget? Because that doesn't fit. It just does not fit. We'll have so much in excess dollars because we made all this investment in infrastructure. So we'll have that much left over. We would have a lot of leftover money at the end of the year. So the question that you asked on what would the allocation be in December, I couldn't spend all that money. It's not even possible to be able to spend how much money we're going to be left behind because we sacrificed on the personnel side, and that's the rationale that I tried to share with Lane. I understand he's not a party to that, and I understand that they're not carryover funds. But what I did press, I'm trying to press the point to the chairman that the sacrifice that Lane and I had agreed to make, because we testified to this committee and asked you to upgrade the infrastructure.
Will Mr. Gonzalez yield for a second?
I yield to the chairwoman.
Mr. Boulier,
Yes, ma'am.
The agreement that you made with a former ranking member
Yes.
cannot be a party to what is going on in this particular.
Yeah, but we don't operate in a vacuum. All those computers and everything are sitting over there, ma'am.
And we're not asking you to operate in the vacuum, but you keep saying, this is what Evans and I did. But Evans is no longer that party with you, so now you have to deal with the chairman, who's Mr. Filner.
But that's my challenge. He said, Steve, I'm going to take the budget that you and Lane gave. Then let me tell you what Lane and I did.
If no further questions by Mr. Gonzalez.
I yield back. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. May I please see the two of you
I'd love
after the committee hearings?
Love
Thank you
to.
both so
Thank
much.
you.
Yes,
And
Ms.
the principal's office is where?
I am not by no means trying to admonish you on this, just trying to see whether we can be accommodating. Thank you so much. The estimated time, let's see what I have left here. Yeah, right, you're right about that. I would say another hour. Where's the chair? Mr. Chairman and ranking member, can you come back in an hour? Thank you very much. We now have with us okay, now we have before us the Chairman of Energy and Commerce, Mr. Dingle, and the ranking member, Mr. Barton. We thank you so much for your tolerance, your patience, and you may proceed, Mr. Chairman. I know there's a time constraint that you have, too.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to place my full statement in the record, and I'll try and summarize.
So be it.
If you would view that as being helpful.
Yes.
First of all, it's a privilege to be before you, and thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. I'm delighted to be here with our ranking member, Joe Barton, and the two of us joined together in requesting the resources necessary to ensure effective consideration of the committee's business and operations of the committee over the next 2 years. I want to commend Chairman Barton for the superb job he performed in running the committee, given the limits placed on him by his leadership. He was an outstanding chairman and is a great friend of mine. This budget, Madam Chairman, is a preview of the one which will be formally considered adopted by the committee tomorrow. You are aware that we were forced to postpone a meeting of the Commerce Committee to approve our budget request because of the death of our colleague from Georgia, Congressman Charlie Norwood. Our funding resolution will be introduced shortly after the committee acts, and I promise you that that will be done with all speed. This budget requests both the significant increase in the workload of the Committee on Energy and Commerce and the need to retrain and attract skilled staff. The committee is off to a fast start and moving forward with ambitious and broad agenda. We are developing a substantive, balanced, and thorough record on climate change and global warming, including 8 hearings this month, and we expect that we will produce significant legislation. Moving forward on children's health, the S-CHIP program, Medicare payments, prescription drug and medical device user fees, consumer protection and privacy, environmental programs, telecommunications, and a host of other legislative matters. We will be also carrying out important investigative and oversight activities, and already the committee has launched oversight hearings into nuclear safety issues, prescription drug safety, and we are continuing a number of investigations begun earlier under my friend and colleague, Chairman Barton. Since January, the committee's held 7 hearings and 2 meetings in addition to its role in the first 100 hours in the stem cell research, prescription drug negotiation legislation, and the 911 Commission recommendations. The committee has planned an additional 28 hearings, 6 markups, and meeting over the next 4 weeks for a combined total of 42 hearings and meetings before we reach the district work period. It is already clear that our resources are stretched very much without any increases in funding. I would like to cite 3 areas driving our budget numbers. First, personnel. In our efforts to recruit excellent top-notch committee staff who are expert in their areas, we compete not only against the more lucrative jobs downtown, where beginning attorneys look upward for salaries of better than $150,000, but also with the salary levels of many senior staff in the executive branch. And many of the staff we have recruited to work with the committee during this Congress have accepted significant pay cuts to serve the Congress and the public. We do need more staff, and in the first 2 months in the majority, the committee staff has worked an excessive number of hours to accomplish the work before us. We're currently under a staff cap of 108. We requested this committee an increase of 5 slots for 2007 and additional 4 slots for 2008 for a total of 118 in the second session. 3 of these 9 slots would be assigned to the minority. And I want to make it clear, Madam Chairman, that we will see to it that the rules of 1/3, 2/3 are honored fully in this committee. I am committed to providing the same resources Mr. Barton made available to us in the last Congress, and we will give him his share of whatever additional staff members or funding is made available to the committee. Third, increases in cost. In every category, we find the cost of services and products is going up. The committee's technology needs would include significant upgrading of our computer system, replacing aged copiers and fax machines, and I report with embarrassment that our copy machines have precluded us from having you the statements and supporting papers that we had hoped to have you and are required under the rules because of the failures of our copying systems. We also will be purchasing licenses and other software uses to enable this technology to be in compliance with House and industry requirements. In the case of the committee's computer system, the House Information Resources no longer supports some of the critical applications we use. Therefore, the committee must now upgrade these programs unless we find ourselves without technical support from the House if problems rise. There have been increases, as you well know, in travel expenses, which all the committees incur in needed field hearings and in the conduct of investigations, to bringing witnesses here to testify and to attend policy conferences. And we have seen this push our budget numbers upward. While we try to anticipate spending in these areas, events occur in our country which require action by the committee and which oftentimes requires unanticipated spending of committee funds, such as the case of Enron, the BP oil disaster, and Hurricane Katrina. Committee actions in response to a crisis should not then translate into leaving staff positions vacant to make up the difference. Because of these things and because of the workload facing the committee, I ask the serious consideration and the sympathetic consideration and your support, Madam Chairman, and that of the committee for our request for funding for the 110th Congress. I thank you very much for your.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ranking Member.
Well, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, I'll make this easy. Mr. Dingle and I are in agreement. We're supportive of the budget. It's a modest, very modest increase over last year. It's fairly apportioned between the minority and the majority. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much. When you say fairly equal, does that mean the 2/3, 1/3 agreement?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, fine.
We will honor that precisely.
Very well, thank you. And I am hearing that your budget will be approved tomorrow?
I'm sorry.
Praise the Lord.
Yes, we will, Madam Chairman.
Okay, well, I would like to ask unanimous consent that we include their budget in the record and in the resolution once it's been approved. Hearing none, so be it.
Madam Chairman, you're most gracious. We thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we just know that you're doing great things. You talk about 7 hearings and 42 before the district work period. My goodness, you need roller skates to keep up with you two, but we thank you for what you're doing. Let me just have comments from the ranking member, and you'll be on your way.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Just very briefly, first of all, I want to thank you for the firm commitment to the 2/3, 1/3. This committee worked bipartisan way over the past decade to achieve that level, and we want to make sure it continues, so we appreciate that. And we appreciate the spirit with which you're working together. I personally apologize for the delay and you had to endure, but it's because we were having a problem with 2 chairmen who didn't work together. And that is pretty rare, but it does happen.
It's tougher on Mr. Dingle. He's got a lot more people waiting to see him than I do, so it was good that we had him back here.
Okay, well, thank you both very much.
I just would observe this. Mr. Barton has been a good friend for a long time. He has always treated us fairly when we were in the minority, and I'm going to see to it that he is treated with all the fairness and all the decency that I can muster. Because
well, I still remember the very fine speech he gave on your behalf when we celebrated your 50th anniversary, and it's clear that there's a deep and abiding friendship here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you, gentlemen, for the collegiality that you reflect in your working together. Good luck to you both. Now we have Mr. Spratt, the chairman of the Budget Committee. And I'm hearing, Mr. Spratt, that while we were trying to settle some issues here at the committee, your ranking member has left, or is that correct? Is he here?
Paul Ryan was here just a minute ago.
Mr. Ryan?
He had to go to a meeting.
He had to leave for another meeting?
Yeah.
Then you will...
We concur, though, in everything. I think I can safely say that, and I'll make our presentation quickly.
Then why don't you go on and do that, Mr. Chairman, and then I will ask unanimous consent that we receive your testimony and devoid of your ranking member being with you.
And your staff has a copy of it, which I signed.
Yes, we do have. Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you for this opportunity. Mr. Ayers, ranking member, thank you also for the chance to testify before this committee regarding the Budget Committee's funding request for the 110th Congress. For each session of the 110th Congress, the Budget Committee requests the funding level that is frozen at last year's total. That is, we're requesting the same funding for 2007 and 2008 as we had in 2006. In fact, this is the same amount that we had in 2004 and 2005. As a result, our request for the 2-year period of the 110th Congress reflects no increase from the 2-year period of the 109th Congress. Looking at the funding request on an account-by-account level, the largest account by far is the personnel account. I should explain that in the last Congress, our personnel accounts turned out to be less than anticipated. There were vacancies because the chairman was term limited, expected not to be coming back, and there was an expectation that the new chairman would wish to make personnel decisions of his own. For the 110th Congress, considerable progress has been made in filling these vacancies with highly qualified staff, and our personnel costs will increase decidedly. Nevertheless, our request should provide sufficient resources for personnel costs in the 110th Congress. When we as Democrats were in the minority, we had a mutually agreeable arrangement with the chairman of the committee, the previous majority, and we've consulted with our minority and intend to continue this practice in the 110th Congress. That is, the minority controlled a third of the total budget for personnel, meaning a third of the available staff slots and a third of the line item money for personnel expenses. Additionally, we will continue the committee's past practice of upgrading the minority's equipment out of the overall committee budget. I think we have a good working relationship. We have a mutual agreement upon this budget. And as an example to the rest of the Congress, we are simply saying we will get by with what we've got. And we're glad to make a request to that effect. But we do need what we're requesting, which is around $12 million. But as I said, that's the same amount of money we've enjoyed for the last 4 years.
Well, Mr. Chairman, one thing for sure, you recognize the fact that we are in budget constraints, and if there's no one better than you to know that, you are. And operating from last year's baseline and then increasing this your budget by a mere 2.2% is what we are offering in terms of your increase this year. And given that your ranking member is not here, may I just ask, is there an agreement between the two of you for the 2/3, 1/3? I may have been talking to staff when you may have said that.
Yeah.
There's an agreement?
Yes, ma'am, there's an agreement to that effect.
Okay, fine. Mr. Ranking Member, do you have comments?
Just following up on that, and I understand that both of you work together in this budget, and you both are approving of what you submitted. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. The last point I'd like to make is I appeared recently to testify before your budget committee on a very important issue and gave a superb, heartfelt plea, and unfortunately you weren't there to hear it. So I won't take your time here now, but I will have to talk to you later about that.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to coerce you at all. It's only your budget that depends on it.
All right, sir. Could I say one thing?
Yes, please.
I'm just jesting, but I appreciate the difficult task that you have to do.
It is indeed. I am the second ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Ike, of course, is the chairman of the committee, and I'm second in seniority to him. And I'd like to make a pitch for that particular committee. They'll be presiding over a budget this year, when you include the supplementals, of $643 billion for 2008. That's the largest amount of money we've spent on defense in constant dollars at any time since the Second World War. They need...
Say that again. 600 and what?
$643 billion. That includes DOE and DOD, defense and energy. $643 billion. It's $501 billion for the base budget and $140-odd billion for the supplemental for 2008. They need additional staff. And part of the problem we've got with that committee is at a time when the staff in the Congress were growing abundantly, in the late 70s, mid-80s, early to mid-80s. Our committee was chaired by people who were satisfied with what they had in the way of committee staff, and we were not aggressively building up our staff at a time when that was possible and the funding was available, and we're now suffering the consequences. But we have an enormous responsibility for the stewardship of $643 billion, the conduct of the expeditionary deployments in the Persian Gulf and elsewhere, and of all the committees in the Congress. I don't know the other needs, but I can tell you right now they need additional staff, and anything you can do to help them, I think, would be very responsible and very, very much appreciated.
Thank you. Finish, Mr. Ranking Member. Well, we will take that under consideration, Mr. Chairman, and certainly there are many things that I will be taking back to the speaker to consult with her on, and that is one that we will be taking back with us. Now, are there any comments from either one of the members who are presently here? Mr. Spratt, given the fact that your ranking member had to go to a meeting, I will have to ask unanimous consent that his testimony, along with yours, be submitted for the record, and will be, and have them to agree to that being sufficient testimony for your being here in lack of the ranking member. And that's unanimous consent from the members. All those present, aye. So thank you, Mr. Spratt.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for your patience here today. Mr. Goodlatte, I see you are here, and your chairman is on its way in. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry? Okay, fine. Gentlemen, let me first thank you so much for your patience. You have been exceedingly patient throughout our trying to come to some agreements with some of the issues that were presented before us. But one thing for sure, you have a big issue coming before you, and that's that farm bill, and so we want to talk about it, want you to present your budget and your statement. So, Mr. Chairman, welcome. Ranking member, welcome, and you may proceed, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Ranking Member. And I appreciate the chance to be with you today, and also appreciate my ranking member, Mr. Goodlatte, for joining me here to outline our committee's proposed budget for the next 2 years. The Committee on Agriculture has long had a history of bipartisan cooperation that was upheld with distinction during Mr. Goodlatte's chairmanship, and I trust that that will continue in the 110th Congress. As been noted, we have a very important year coming up in the Agriculture Committee, as we're going to be writing a new farm bill which authorizes our nation's farm, conservation, nutrition, and rural development programs. And the current farm bill was written in 2002, and many of its provisions are going to expire by the end of September, so we're going to be facing a major task over the next few months to get a bill ready before the current bill expires. In addition, this year, our committee has added an additional subcommittee, so we now have a total of 6 subcommittees. The expanded subcommittee structure will help us and be useful in writing this new farm bill, and as we conduct what I hope to be a very active oversight program, which we've outlined in the attached oversight plan. We are focusing in a couple areas with these new subcommittees. One of them in the energy area, where we'll be doing a considerable amount of work in the research and development of feedstocks for cellulosic ethanol. And we've also made a horticulture and organic agriculture subcommittee, and the focus on organics is going to be one of the things that we're going to be looking at that we haven't really, well, we've worked on before, but we're going to put more focus because I believe there's a real opportunity in organic agriculture for the folks that want to go into that, and we're going to focus on that. Our committee has had a strong tradition of offering outstanding service and research materials related to legislation, not only for the committee and its members, but for other members of Congress. You know, we're excited about the opportunities that are in front of us. I've been in and around agriculture all my life, and I've never seen a time where there's so much optimism, so much excitement in agriculture is going on right now because of the opportunities in renewable fuels and ethanol and biodiesel and these areas, which are in Minnesota has been a huge success, and it's brought young people back to the farm, and we want to try to expand that experience all across the country. Given the increased workload that the committee will assume this year, we propose a modest but necessary increase in funding due to the expanded subcommittee structure and the additional workload expected for the committee. These resources, we believe, will be essential for the committee's success in the 110th Congress. Many of our responsibilities this year will require additional effort from our staff, and I expect, I've already told them that they can be expecting to work weekends starting here pretty quick, all the way through September. I told my committee members that they shouldn't plan too much for the August break because we may be doing conference committee during that period of time. So we're going to be putting in a lot of hours, but you know, after careful consideration, I believe that our existing committee staff structure is sufficient, and I've not requested any additional positions at this time. And in our request, we have carefully weighed and balanced, we think, the committee's growing needs with an important goal for myself and a lot of our members, and that is fiscal responsibility. The committee's responsibilities in the 110th Congress have implications for all Americans, and our proposed budget will allow us to craft a farm bill that meets the needs of our nation's agriculture producers and the consumers that we produce for. We have basically kept the structure of the committee exactly like it was when Mr. Goodlatte was chairman. As I've said, we have a great working relationship. We just flipped things around. It was 32-16-4 the Republican way. Now it's 32-16-4 the Democrat way. So we've kept everything exactly the way it is. And once the farm bill is over with, we intend to spend some significant time on doing oversight. I've got some concerns about the organization of the department and some of the levels of bureaucracy and so forth over there that I think haven't been examined as much as they should. So we will have a lot of work to get to once we get done with the farm bill. So we'd appreciate your consideration and appreciate the chance to be with you.
And thank you. We appreciate your outlining this very active agenda that you are putting before us. Mr. Goodlatte?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Ranking Member Ehlers, and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today to support the Agriculture Committee's 110th budget request alongside Chairman Peterson. As Colin said, our committee has enjoyed a long history of bipartisanship, and I look forward to a continued environment of cooperation as we proceed with the work of the committee in the 110th Congress. The committee's primary focus in the last Congress was to gather information from America's farmers and ranchers in preparation for reauthorizing the 2002 Farm Bill, which expires in September. Since this omnibus agricultural legislation is only reauthorized every 5 to 6 years, it was important that our review be as pervasive and inclusive as possible. Throughout a series of 19 full and subcommittee field hearings, we heard from 178 farmers and ranchers, in addition to the nearly 3,000 comments we gathered via our website from producers and non-producers alike. Our goal was to find out what in the current bill was working and what aspects could be improved. Today's producers are facing new challenges that weren't in play in the run-up to the 2002 Farm Bill. We asked our farmers and ranchers for their candid feedback, and they answered loud and clear. Although the feedback varied by region and commodity, producers had one thing in common. They want to continue to produce, and they need our help. Now that we've gathered the information, our next step is to begin to formulate the content of the bill and put it down on paper. The bill we will write later this year will encompass most of the areas under the committee's jurisdiction, including farm programs, forestry, food stamps, pesticides and commodities trading regulation, rural development, and the farm credit system. This will be a significant undertaking that will require all our staff resources, and I'm confident the committee's staff is up to the challenge. In addition to its history of bipartisanship, the Agriculture Committee has a strong history of fiscal responsibility. The modest spending and cooperative nature of our committee spans back more than 2 decades,
under the control of both parties. It's my intention to work with Chairman Peterson and the members of the committee to ensure that this tradition is continued, and ask that you grant us the funds needed to reach our goals. And let me say that in the first 2 months, Chairman Peterson has lived up to his comments, and we have worked in a bipartisan spirit. And in fact, given the fact that the majority moving to a minority status has to make certain adjustments, we have looked to those, and I think we've also helped the majority in a number of ways to help them in their new status. So we look forward to their cooperative efforts and to your support of those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have just said those things that's music to our ears, and that's the cooperative spirit between the two of you in a bipartisan effort to make sure that this works. Of course, you have the big farm bill that's ahead of you, the other one expiring in September. I am just really pleased to know that the youth are coming back to farmland. That is not only optimistic and exciting, but it's the future, and it's the future of our farmers. Your opportunities are vast, and as you spoke, Mr. Chairman, on organic agriculture, that seems extremely exciting, something a young person in college would love to get their hands around. And Mr. Goodlatte, when you talk about forestry and food stamps, you tend to not think that they are congruent, so it's just amazing how these things all come together for the good. It is indeed a privilege to have the two of you before us this afternoon. And again, I don't have to ask, but I will for the record, Mr. Chairman, the 2/3, 1/3, plus your willingness to work within the borders of that and even outside of it is what you have committed to.
Excuse me. Yes, absolutely. We are committed to that, and that's how it will work.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ranking Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank you also for the commitment. In most committees I have to talk to, I say we work very hard to reach the 2/3, 1/3, and you're one of the few committees that met that requirement before.
We didn't have to work hard. We're
yeah, before the Republicans took over in 1995, you already met that. You will be interested to know that the staffing back then was not 3216, it was 6644. So your staff has been slimmed down quite a bit since 1993. But I appreciate the spirit with which you work together. One quick question. If the farmers are doing so well, does that mean there's going to be less expenditure under the Farm Bill?
Less spending?
Less expenditures.
Yes. Well, the commodity title is down $60 billion from 2002.
Really?
We had over the 10-year baseline, we had $140 billion in 2002 projected. The projection for the next 10 years under the baseline is $80 billion.
That's good.
So we'll be able to maintain the safety net that we put in place for less money because prices are better.
Yeah.
And the Farm Bill worked the way it was supposed to. We saved $17 billion so far over the life of the bill, below what was projected, and they're projecting out a $60 billion savings. Now, in other areas, the budget is up. In the food stamp and school nutrition, it is up 54%, because we're getting more people to understand about the availability and get more use of it, and this is a very good use of our government resources to make sure that kids are getting meals, and we're looking at some new ideas about trying to get more nutritious food into the schools and making sure that people that need food have food. So I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of now 67% of our budget will go to food stamps and nutrition, and the commodities are way down. So we're saving money in the area that most people think of when they think of the Farm Bill. That's the commodity area, but we are spending more money on conservation, more money on food stamps, and we hope to be able to spend more money on research for renewable fuels, because I think that's something everybody in the country wants us to do.
Quite right, and I'm not convinced at all that corn is the answer. I think there are a number of better alternatives out there, and that's where the research comes.
We're going to be working on those.
Yeah. Have no further questions.
Mr. Ehlers, if I might add to that, I think you're exactly right. We need to rush the research and rush the development as best we possibly can with agricultural policy, and quite frankly, the free market will determine that more than we will, but to other forms of other sources for renewable fuels, because corn is badly needed in other sectors of our economy for livestock feed and human consumption and so on. Let me get back to the issue before the House Administration Committee. The numbers you cited are quite frankly stunning, because as of right now, we have fewer staff between the two of us than the minority had of 44 that you cited in that number. So I hope you keep that in mind when you talk to other committees about what they're asking for and what they need and what they justify. The reason I raise that as a member of this committee is because it is a problem for us, being the fiscal conservatives that we both are, and our committee has historically been. When we come in and when we identify a real need that we have from time to time, and you're listening to some of the requests that you get from some of the other committees on a more constant basis, I've got to say that it makes it harder for us to do what we do in the fiscally responsible way that we do it when other committees are making what I think are unnecessary requests.
Yeah, we're well aware of that. That I yield back.
Well, one thing for sure, they can make the requests, but as we know, the budget has come in on last year's baseline, and the increase is very modest at about 2.2, 2.3%. So every chairperson and ranking member has left with the notion that that's the way it goes.
But I think, Madam Chairman, my point is that if you go back to looking at the numbers that he cited, where we are operating with far less than half the staff, they're not operating from the same baseline. And that, you know, in terms of the historic, not just one year to the next, but historically, it would be helpful to make them reassess their overall needs.
Well,
we do that every 2 years.
Duly noted, because many have come requesting more staff, and so your point is well taken. Are there any of the members who wish to? Yes, Mr.
I just want to congratulate these two, because I happen to serve on this committee, but the professionalism between the two has trickled down in the subcommittees and everywhere else. The only thing I will say, I do point out that the work that they have to do this year, and by the number of people that they have, and the timeline the chairman has set out for us, is very aggressive, that we should take this very serious on their request.
Thank you so much for your comments. Mr. Gonzalez, any comments? Thank you, gentlemen, so much, and thank you for continuing to show your leadership in this area.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. And again, thanks so much for your patience. Patience is golden. Thank you so much. We have before us now the chairman and ranking member of the Science Tech, Chairman Gordon and ranking member Hall. Thank you so much. And again, we thank you for the patience that you've shown throughout this afternoon. And you're ready to go, Mr. Gordon? We're ready to talk
Chairman,
with you.
And Mr. Ehlers and other committee members, I think you're probably the ones that should be congratulated for patience. Just being around here the short time, hearing the groveling and complaining, I know it would wear on you. So I appreciate your attention today. I also expect that there's a direct or inverse relationship between the shorter we are, the more money we may get. So I'm going to hope that's the case and try to be very brief here with you. I was surprised to see the roll call the other day that had all the various requests. Apparently, folks didn't get the memo. I thought we were supposed to stick to 4%, 4%. We may not even get that 4%. And so we really tried to do that with our budget, and that's all that we asked for. And we're not unlike any other committees in terms of inflation with our travel, with our resources and things of this nature. But we are a little different in this regard. As Mr. Ehlers can very well tell you, most committees, if you have, if you're very bright and you have good world experiences, then there's probably a place for you. On the Science and Technology Committee, that's really just not the case. We not only have to have that element, but it really has to have a good academic understanding of some very complex issues that makes it very difficult for us to be able to find these folks. In the majority right now, we have 7 PhDs, 3 JDs, and 9 staffers that have graduate degrees. And that's really what it, what it takes. Another, I think, difference for us is that a lot of committees probably are slow in getting staffed up. We have one more hire because, pardon me, Mr. Ehlers, but last September, we started running ads saying that if we get the majority, that we want to go ahead and start taking applications then. And so we tried to get a running start on that. The other thing that's a little bit different is that in '95, the Oversight Investigation Committee was done away with. We do not think that's the way we should operate. We think that oversight is responsibility of the committee, and that having a subcommittee to do that is important. And so we've added that additional subcommittee. So I think we are somewhat different in those categories. And I ask you to keep that in mind as if there is going to be some massaging later on. I think another question that I should respond to that you haven't asked me, but you should ask me, is I see that the Science Committee gave some money back the last 2 Congresses. So why do you need any additional money? And let me explain that. I think, again, Mr. Ehlers and I probably share a frustration that in the last 2 Congresses, that the majority leadership at that time was saying do less. Our majority now is saying do more. And so they did not have their full staff allotment. There is really some deferred maintenance. Already this year, we had the first open rule. We had the first bill on the floor that dealt with renewable energy. We had the first bill on the floor that dealt with climate change. We as Mr. Ehlers again can tell you, we marked up 4 bills today. We are kicking it out because we've got up and we're running, and we've got a good professional staff, and we need to be able to keep them and add to them. And I would hope you would keep that in mind, and I, if it's appropriate, yield to my friend, Mr. Hall.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Chairman.
Move the mic up and turn it on for us, please, sir. Is it on?
Yeah.
There you are.
Madam Chairman and members, I thank you. And, the numerical division in this committee is 2/3 and 1/3, and I think that carries over to presentations. He's made 2/3 of the presentation, and I'll take only a half of what he took. I could simply read the last paragraph of that they wrote for me and say, Chairman Gordon has put forth to this committee a reasonable, well-documented request that will allow the Science and Technology Committee to continue to engage in important policy work. I look forward to working with him over the next few years. But that's not all I really want to say. I just want to say that the committee has a long history of bipartisan cooperation, and we've already passed several good bills and worked together on them. I'm confident that the chairman and I are going to continue that tradition for years, and I fully support the operating budget that he submitted, including the 4% increase over last year's funding level. And the modest increase is vital, I think, to keep pace with the inflation and the cost of living increases alone. So, and whether we're dealing with energy research and development, American competitiveness, or NASA oversight, our committee's at the center of these discussions. We have a very talented staff of individuals on both sides. Bart's a good native Tennessean, a good guy to work with. I've said a lot of times that Texas owes Tennessee our very existence, and he also always remains and says every time a guy leaves Tennessee, it raises the dignity of both states, and I guess that's probably true. But I leave with this, thanking you for your time and your cooperation with us, working us in at this time, and I'd leave asking Bart for a copy of that ad that they ran that helped them get control of the floor.
You can see why Mr. Hall is good to work with. If I could add one more thing. Former Chairman Sherry Bowler did a lot of good things. One thing that he did do also was he had a study done on making the Science Committee a model committee for energy efficiency within Congress. We have not acted on that in terms of we have the study, we know what to do. We are meeting with the architect of the Capitol today, not the architect of the Capitol, but I guess what's the proper term? Leanne, shout out. It is a Capitol, okay. to review those and to hopefully set our committee up as a model committee. The Senate has already started doing something like that. I think what we'll find is that once our committee is set up and we see the efficiencies that will come forth, it will more than pay for itself. But there's going to be some additional expense in doing that also. But I think that it's a good investment because you will be getting that back as other offices start to do the same and we get those energy efficiency savings.
Excellent. Absolutely excellent. Have moved right into the 21st century and beyond, frankly. We appreciate both of your testimony today. I know it has been a long day for you as it has been for us. I will just turn it quickly over to 4 markups today. That is a whole lot, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. So I applaud you both on that. Mr. Ranking Member, any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I picked up on the fact that you were both committed to the 2/3, 1/3 ratio. We are making a big point in that because it took 12 years to establish that, and we want to make sure we don't lose it. And we appreciate that both of you are committed to maintaining that.
Well, the Science Committee has good precedent in that, and we're happy to follow it.
Right.
And I will mention, gosh, I'm sorry, but one more thing, since you mentioned that, one other reason that we're a little different than the other committees is that we told all the Republican staff members that if they weren't hired by Mr. Hall, because he only had so many spots, or if they didn't find any other place to go, that we would keep them on salary. And so that's another reason, I mean, and that we, don't have a lot of flex early on. And what's more than that, we also told them all that they could all interview for jobs. We hired 7 of our 20 slots as the former members of the Republican staff. And so, again, it's important to keep that institutional knowledge, that high level of staffers, and we tried to do that, and we, again, spent some money that other committees didn't by keeping on the Republican folks that didn't have a place to go.
And that's not only generous of you, it's kind of you, and I admire and respect the Speaker for her recommendation early in the session that they keep those youngsters on for 2 months or 3 months, and I think that failed, and I haven't really gone back to see who really defeated it, but I think that was a good idea, to encourage our young to stay and support it and take interest in their government because it belongs to them, and old people don't fight wars, and old people don't pay budgets, and I think we got to keep the youth increasingly interested in science and math and engineering.
Couldn't agree with you more on that.
Overcome the thing that we
Absolutely. Mr. Ellers?
Yes, I certainly agree with those comments and appreciate what you've said. Just one quick one, Mr. Gordon. One time you talked to me and said you thought you could live within the dollar budget you're putting in, but that you really needed a few extra slots. And you did request those?
Well, again, recognizing that this is a modest budget and difficult time, we made a request for 1. And so, we will, as we staff up, we may be back, but we think that if we have 1 additional one, that will help us get over this hump.
All right. I was ready to fight for 2, but if you'll settle for 1, then.
We'd like to have 2. We were just trying to be, in the spirit of things this time.
But
yeah, we can sure find a place for them.
All right, fine. With that, I yield back.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ranking Member. Thank you to 2 of you for your great testimony and the great things that you're doing when you have all of those JDs, PhDs, and graduate degrees personnel. You can't go wrong in a science committee. Thank you so much, and we look forward to continuously working with you. Now we have with us the Chairman and Ranking Member of Intelligence, Chairman Reyes and Ranking Member Hoekstra. Good evening, good afternoon. Well, it's going to be no, we're still in the afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for your patience as we move into this afternoon, and look forward to your testimony, and you may begin, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman and Ranking Member. We appreciate your patience as well, because We know it's been a long afternoon. The ranking member and I are here to present a completely bipartisan budget request for the 110th Congress. This budget process was actually started back in November by committee staff under the guidance of Mr. Hoekstra, and was actually finished in the last couple of weeks with guidance from me. We are requesting a very modest 1% increase in the budget allocation from 2006 to 2007. In 2008, the committee will be moving down to its new location in the Capitol Visitor Center and will require a 6% increase to cover equipment purchases and payroll. There is absolutely no padding in this budget that we are requesting, and the requested funds are necessary to keep the committee operating in its normal capacity and conducting oversight of the intelligence community. Due to the committee's spaces being co-located in the Capitol building, the committee is very concerned with its continuity of operations plan. Should anything ever happen to the Capitol building, it is almost certain that the committee would not have access to the building for several months or perhaps even years. Thus, we have begun to research, plan, and budget for an off-site backup. The equipment needed for redundant secure communications will allow the committee to be stood up in the case of an emergency and is provided for in this budget request. For the previous 30 years, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence has been able to receive information, communications, budget documents, and briefings from the intelligence community through one secure fax machine and cleared couriers. We are probably the only committee left in the House that receives the majority of its information and oversight materials on paper. This, Madam Chairman, will change during the 110th Congress. The HPSI members and staff will have complete access to secret Internet Protocol Router Network, otherwise known as SIPRNet, and the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communication System, or GWIX. This will allow the committee to receive classified material electronically and will save thousands of courier hours a year. In order to implement this new capability in the 110th Congress, the committee will require a large investment in equipment. Although the HPSI operates on a bipartisan basis, the budget request also reflects an allocation of one third of the committee's personnel compensation to staff members who principally serve the interest of the minority. The minority has controlled a third of the payroll budget since the 106th Congress, and this practice will continue in the 110th Congress. In order to carry out its work, the HPSI must recruit and retain highly qualified and cleared staff. Many staff members have been active in the intelligence community for decades and are vigorously sought after by the private sector. The HPSI has been given 44 staff slots since the 108th Congress. Due to office space constraints in the Capitol where we reside, the HPSI did not have more than 40 staff at any one time. The minority is allowed 13 staff, the majority 26 staff, and there are 5 shared staff. If additional space is provided, or once the committee moves to the Capitol Visitor Center, we intend to ramp up to the 44 staff slots that have been authorized. So in conclusion, Madam Chairman, we believe these increases are justified by the committee's oversight plan, which seeks to ensure that the intelligence community is observing its legal obligations and has the resources and capabilities to carry out its critical and increasingly risky mission. I want to thank you this afternoon for the opportunity to present this budget request, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ranking Member?
Ditto. And the only thing I would add is, I very much appreciate the process that Silver has gone through as we've gone through the difficulty of, staff reductions with the transfer, but the chairman has been very, very gracious in making sure that we accommodate the needs of the staff as we've gone through that process. And I think we've now completed that, and I think it's worked very, very well for the committee, and it's worked very, very well for the staff that were affected. So, as Silver said, this is a totally bipartisan budget, and I endorse it 100%.
Thank you so much. Ranking Member?
I just want to verify you have the 2/3, 1/3 rule going. Everybody's in agreement there?
Yeah, actually we do, and the way the committee is set up, we also have shared positions
And that is, Jane and I were in total agreement in the last Congress on how we structure that, and that agreement is carried forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and it is great to see such a committee of interest. You're just so needed in the work that you do, covert, overt, whatever, but it's still very much needed to see the two of you coming together in a bipartisan effort. And that's a great deal of leadership on the part of the chairman as well as the ranking member who was the chairman early on. We thank you so much for being here. I do not see any further questions that are needed in this late hour. We do know that there is a modest increase of a 2.4% because we are operating from the budget base of last year, and this year that's a very modest increase. But nevertheless, this is what we have. This is what has been given to us by the Appropriators and Budget Committee. But we appreciate the work that you do. If there's something else that should come down the pike, we will certainly let you, and you will be aware of that and let you hear from us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
If I was to just say one thing, we thought we were going to be in the CVC already, and the budgeting and planning for that was very, very difficult, and I'm not sure we would have had the money if we would have actually moved in. So I hope that that we actually do move into the Visitor Center during Silver's service as chairman, recognizing that if we do move in there, I hope we don't have any unanticipated costs, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were some.
Well, it's amazing you talk about that because we will be very soon having a hearing on CVC, and so we will let you know perhaps in short order as to what will be developing there. Thank you both so very,
Thank you
very
very
much. Welcome. Standards. And I'd like to first congratulate the new chairwoman. It is good to see a chairwoman in the position of authority, and we thank you so much for coming before the committee today to outline your budget and to speak with us about the great things that you guys will be doing. Of course, ethics is on the front line and part of the priority for not only this Congress, but for the American people. They're looking for you to do great things. So congratulations, Chairwoman Tubbs-Jones. It is also good to see you, Mr. Former Chair and Ranking Member, Mr. Hastings. Because of the brevity of time, we will ask you to go right into your presentations, and you might start, Madam Chairwoman. And I appreciate that. Well, you may yield, but I'm going to yield to him anyway. Mr. Yes, and that's fine. We're asking everyone to submit their full testimony for the record, and you've done just as we had wanted you to do, so thanks so very much. Mr. Ranking Member. You want to push that mic up and turn it on for me.
I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you with the Ethics Committee request for the 110th Congress. Chairwoman Tubb Jones and I, as well as other colleagues, have been called on to serve at a very serious and challenging time for the Ethics Committee. As you know, several events through much of the 109th Congress shined a bright spotlight on the committee's very difficult work. While challenges remain, I believe the committee's performance during the last 8 months of 2006, particularly the oversight of the Page Program investigation, demonstrated that given a sincere commitment on both sides of the aisle, the committee can effectively carry out its obligations to this House. And Ms. Tubbs Jones and I spent a great deal of time here as a member of that subcommittee in October, and I believe that we demonstrated that we can work. As you know, as the chairwoman pointed out, the committee has two primary tasks: to educate, inform, and advise members and staff about their ethical responsibilities pursuant to the rules of the House, and to force those rules firmly and fairly without regard to friendship, favor, or political party. Progress on these two fronts is vital to our overarching goal to secure and raise American people's confidence in the integrity of the House as an institution. The American people deserve and expect their elected representatives to abide by the highest ethical standards, and that is what we must strive to achieve. I believe the recent increased interest in ethics provides us with a unique opportunity to work together and provide for successful results. At this hearing 2 years ago, I outlined an aggressive plan to substantially upgrade and enhance the ethics education and training, publications, and communications with the goal of enhancing our ability to help members and staff to understand the rules and to follow them. At that time, I requested a substantial increase in funding for salaries, equipment, and travel to fund 6 new positions and to provide our committee with tools to better serve members and staff in the House. And I appreciate very much the House Administration's Committee's willingness to fund that vision. But as you know, certain problems during the last Congress blocked our efforts to pursue these objectives that we would have liked, but I'm more committed than ever to moving forward with them, and I'm pleased that the chairwoman and I share this commitment that I just outlined, that we outlined 2 years ago. I join her today in asking that you once again provide these resources necessary to enhance our efforts in these areas. In addition, in light of several significant changes to House rules adopted in January by the 110th Congress, the chairwoman and I are preparing for the Ethics Committee to take on new responsibilities that the committee has not had in the past in areas of gift, public travel, and public disclosure. And I hope this committee will provide the resources necessary to do that, because I believe that the members of this House need, as quickly as possible, responses from us when they ask questions. They are, in fact, customers of this committee. So specifically, we have asked additional funding for salaries, equipment, and travel for 5 new positions, as was outlined by the chairwoman. So while recognizing the tight budget times that we face, we believe that this budget request is realistic and responsible. It will at least follow the full implementation of the vision that I put forth at the beginning of the last Congress. It will help us meet our new responsibilities with the rules recently passed by the 110th Congress, and most importantly, it will strengthen the trust in the integrity of this revered institution, and I think that's important to all of us. So with that, I stand fully behind the statement of the distinguished chairwoman of this committee, and I'm looking forward to working with her this year, and we both stand ready to ask questions or answer questions if you have any.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I like that statement that you made, Mr. Ranking Member. You two were called on to serve. That is indeed true. Because of the high integrity that you bring to the committee, coupled with your wanting to make sure that the integrity is above board and that everything that you do is above board, I think it's a testimony and a testament to your two being put in these assignments. So we thank you so much for your being here. Now, I am trying to, because rules has to go back to a markup and others, I'm trying to shorten some of the things. I don't think I have to ask any questions because you have said it all. But I will refer to the ranking member for any statement that he might have.
I'll just be very brief. I just want to thank you two for working so well together. And as a new member, I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you, those rules and regulations, because all of us new members are start asking what are the rules, and everyone says wait till rules gets it. So our ethics comes out with it. So we look forward to your work.
Thank you.
Mr. Longworth?
Yeah, I know we're at a tough time here. We have time constraints, but I've got a real concern. I mean, as I understand it, we're unable to give them more than a 2% or 2.4% increase, and their increase is a request of 40-some% for all the new work they're going to do. And as one who has had to already submit a request for a relatively simple thing, the amount of work they're going to be required to do this year under these new rules is extraordinary. And I wonder if I could ask, if you just get a 2% increase, how are we going to be able to have our requests answered by you in a timely fashion?
I just want to correct for the record, our increase is only 28%. Oh, I forgot to turn it on. Thank you, Doc. Our real request is 28%. I know it was reflected in one of the newspapers that it was 40-some%, but they weren't comparing apples and oranges. Our request is 28%, and in order to do the kind of job that you want us to do, that is what we need. Now, if you don't give it to us, we're going to do as much as we can with what we receive. But I would say to you, and I don't know who else I have to go to say that in order for us to pre-approve all the private requests and advisory opinions and to educate 10,000, we're not just educate members, we're required to educate every officer of the House as well as every employee. And we're talking 10,000 people. To do a good job at it, we need to have the money that we're requesting. I'll yield to Doc because he was chair before. Maybe he can add to that.
I think one way to measure this is to start with the number of employees we have, which is only 13. And so if you add that, then what we're asking, I think, is very realistic, and I think that we can do that job. The staff has done an extraordinary job with essentially a static staff and the workload that we had because of all of the awareness of ethical issues in the last Congress. So they've done a remarkable job, but frankly, I think that we can do a better job in a more timely area. You talked about a request coming in. I view this, and the chairwoman views this as you being our customers. You ask us for information. I think we should get that information back to you as quickly as we possibly can. And sometimes that it just takes the manpower. And frankly, with the new responsibilities we have, and I might say, I think with the concurrence of my chairwoman, they are very difficult to wade through. And I don't think that we have gotten to the end of that process yet, to be very honest with you. And so I think we have to have the staff to support us in that regard.
See, my concern is we have adopted new rules. I've always viewed this as an institution. This is part of the nonpartisan nature of the institution, the ethical conduct of the members. And if we set ourselves up for failure such that we put restrictions on ourselves, and because
we don't give you enough money, so you can't do the responsiveness, you're going to put members in a situation where they're either going to have to not do something they should be able to do, or they're going to do it and then be found to be violative of our laws on a technical nature. And I don't wish that on any Democrat or any Republican or any independent in this House. And I am concerned about this institution as an institution. And when you've put a request in for $6,119,000 and our proposed mark is a little less than $5 million, that means you're about 1.1 under what you think you need. Now, everybody asks for what they think they need, but in this particular case, where we've given this tremendous increase in responsibility and a need for timeliness for each member's own integrity, plus what this House is going to look like, I'm really concerned about that. And I know we got a tough situation, but this is one where we may be setting a trap for ourselves.
That's why we're hoping, because the additional responsibility has been put on us by the House, or laid upon us by the House, that the House may lay an additional responsibility on themselves to give us the money that we need to do our job.
Well, you know, frankly, had we passed a budget last year, we would have been able then to give you more increase in your funding source. It is because of a lack thereof, we've had to start from the baseline of last year's budget and do the modest increase. We appreciate what you're doing. We have duly noted what you are requesting as opposed to what we can provide at this juncture. But I will be going back to the speaker, talking about certain things, and Mr. Longren, those are some of the things I will be proposing to her. I cannot say anything will come from that, but at least I will let it be known that you have raised the bar, so now you must have those fundings and resources to go along with it. Thank you so very much, the two of you, for coming before us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Longworth.
Thank you.
Thank you. We know that members are trying to get back. Rules Committee, please come forward. And while we ask for the Rules Committee, we know that Natural Resources chairperson and ranking member have some commitments, I've been told. Are they still here with us, or have they had to leave? They will come back in 10 minutes. Okie dokie, then we'll wrap it up in 10 minutes here. May I please congratulate you, Madam Chairwoman, for being in that position that you're in. I am absolutely ecstatic. I'm pleased to see you in that position, and we thank you for representing us quite well as the woman who chairs the Rules Committee. And I might add, for my California friend, we thank you for the leadership and your chairship when you were there in the last Congress, and we appreciate your coming on as a ranking member. So thanks to both of you, and you may proceed with your statement. Now, I would like to ask if you can just summarize and then let your complete statement be a part of the record for us. Oh, glory, glory, glory.
That's a strange way to start this. Anyway, I'm sorry, I seem to have a page out of place. Our committee is responsible for setting the parameters of debate for specific pieces of legislation, has the unique role of considering the vast majority of complex legislative initiatives before they come to the floor, and maintains jurisdiction over many other issues of critical importance to the ongoing operation of the House. Everything from the opening day rules package to ensuring the House's ability to function in times of crisis. In short, Madam Chair, the Rules Committee is the only body to have such a wide-ranging jurisdictional reach concerning House procedures, while also impacting nearly every major piece of legislation that comes before it on the way to the House floor. Out of respect for the House Administration Committee, the budget I submit today, along with the committee's ranking member, Mr. Dreyer, asks for a budget increase of no more than 2% of the prior year's budget level. It's a budget that will allow us to fund the daily operations of the committee while still investing to a degree in ongoing efforts to serve the House membership and the public. At the same time, however, it is important to note that this committee has historically received much smaller increases in funding than almost all others. A budget increase of only 2% will simply continue that trend. As such, I must express my belief that keeping the committee funding at this level may hinder us from providing the level of services to the House membership and the public that we aspire to. Accepting the proposed guidelines for the Rules Committee budget has led us to reprogram funds to meet growing demands and emerging priorities and essential needs. For example, the committee's funding of travel and equipment have been cut 40 to 46%, respectively, to allow for money to be redirected into accounts like communication and supplies, as well as to uncover increased spending levels resulting from natural growth. Such shifts will result in a budget that will more accurately reflect the actual spending of the committee based on the past year and budget numbers. Funds have also been shifted to the category of other services to address the modernization needs and software development. Both are critical to the committee's ability to increase performance and work output and to meet demand and increase access to Rules Committee information. Mr. Dreyer started the development of the Rules Amendment tracking system software that has already yielded great benefits to the committee. He has done excellent work in moving the committee down a necessary road toward modernization and increased efficiency by investing in the RATS program. This investment must be continued in order to further increase its accessibility and usefulness. That effort will not only continue to return dividends internally within the committee, but also with our daily partners, such as the House leadership and the House parliamentarians. Furthermore, Rules strongly desires to shift to a more dedicated paperless format, as well as to modernize our technology and public outreach efforts. We will need professional help and guidance to be able to do so. I remain confident we can continue to move forward and make progress, although with the limited funds in our budget proposal, project deadlines must be extended to spread out the funding over multiple years. This will obviously delay the benefits from these investments as we continue to improve the services provided by the Committee on Rules. And Madam Chair, any budget that doesn't keep up with both inflation and growing costs impacts those who work under it. We do believe we can fully staff the committee with a slight increase in personnel funding that is called for, while still maintaining our work output. At the same time, this budget will not provide for the desired growth in committee staff, for new positions, or for common cost of living adjustments. The Rules Committee has in the past always provided for 1/3 allocation of salary funding to the minority, and that will be continued. Similarly, the minority will still receive 1/3 of the committee staff slots, but as we strive to offer more services to the member of the House and their staff, we will need increases in this account to provide for them. Madam Chair, the budget, co-sponsored by Ranking Member Dreyer and myself, carefully and responsibly funds priority accounts while reallocating money to more properly reflect the demands on our committee's budget in recent years. Although we would welcome a greater investment in the Rules Committee to help us accomplish our mission, we've chosen to come before you today and present a budget that honors your request by adhering to the recommended budget constraints. Our growing need has not made us unaware of the fact that public funds are precious and must be spent wisely. That is a reality acknowledged by the modest budget we present to you today. And at the same time, it is my hope that the House Administration Committee will keep in mind our future goals and needs when making final allocation decisions. Any further funding assistance would be a great help to both the majority and the minority on our committee as we seek to provide the best possible services to the House and to the public. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Mr. Dreyer.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Until the arrival of Mr. Ehlers, the ranking member of the committee, I was looking forward to saying that this was history-making for me, for the first time ever testifying before an all-California panel. And so if you want to leave now, Mr. Ranking Member, I can in fact have my dream come true to testify before the new distinguished chair of the Administration Committee and my two California colleagues, but I don't mind if you stay, actually. Let me just say that the testimony that the distinguished chair of the Rules Committee, Mrs. Slaughter, has provided has once again shown that she and I agree on absolutely everything. We've never disagreed on any public policy question. We've never disagreed on the structure around which issues are considered on the House floor, and so we've done this again.
Let's not go too far now.
And I will tell you that it was interesting that the one thing that she
praised me on was, in fact, the RATS program, the Rules Amendment Tracking System. And so,
It could have been called STAR.
yeah, she wanted it to be called STAR, but Hugh Halpern, our staff director, ably came up with this brilliant acronym, RATS, to describe our amendment tracking system. I will say that I believe that this is a very appropriate request. The one thing that I hope we'll be able to make clear, they're going to be continuing the pattern that we had in the past of the 1/3 recognition for staffing. I hope that for travel and equipment and services and all that we'll be able to see the 1/3 allocation for the minority, which is something that I do think is very important. But as Ms. Slaughter outlined very appropriately, the Rules Committee is basically the traffic cop for the institution. We need to be prepared at any time to consider not only the daily legislative items that we address, but as she said in her testimony, in a time of crisis, the Rules Committee is regularly called on. And so we do have very important work, so I strongly support the effort that she has here. And since Mr. Young has told me that I'm say just I agree and then shut up, I will now agree and then shut up.
When have you paid attention to anyone, Mr. Dreyer? But that's no. We do appreciate that. And we appreciate your seeing that there were all Californians here and to the ranking member return. So
It was hard to see, but
you're a very astute person. Thanks to the two of you for coming before us. You're very sensitive. You have said that you've come and you honor our requests for the just 2 point, and it is 2.2% for inflation. But we do recognize and appreciate your being very sensitive to that because, because there was not a budget passed last year, we had to go from the baseline and then bring in this modest 2.2%. So we thank you so much. We thank you for what you do in Rules Committee, because after all, you are the determining factor as to what gets to the floor and what doesn't. You have outlined a very ambitious, very challenging agenda, but one that you cannot meet with the two of you working together. Now, there is the agreement of the 2/3, 1/3 in this committee?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Very good. Mr. Ellers, you have a comment.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the 2/3, 1/3 commitment. We are asking that of every committee because, as you know, it was not that way for some time. We've worked over the past dozen years to make sure that every committee meets it, and we want to maintain that forever if we can.
Let me just say that I hope that we can do that not only for staffing allocation, but as I was saying, for equipment and travel and services as well.
Yeah. It turns out that almost every committee negotiates something different between the chair and the ranking member. But the spirit of it is indeed that we will share 2/3, 1/3, and committees negotiate different ways they handle that. But absolutely, we just simply want the commitment here. Secondly, Mr. Dreyer, I apologize I missed the first part. I was having a little meeting in the anteroom with some other folks who needed my attention. But I have to tell you, it's worse than you thought. We have a majority of this committee is Californians.
Oh, my condolences to you, Mr. Ehlers.
Five,
you'll survive. You'll survive. I guess.
5 out of 9. And it's not so much a problem that they're from California. It's just that, as you know, Californians never agree with each other. So
I've not seen any evidence of that.
So my role.
Never seen evidence of that.
So my role here is as referee between the. Be that as it may, we appreciate your testimony. You run a good committee, and I hope that I get as many amendments from
I'll be trying, I
the
promise.
new chairman as I did from you. And certainly thank you for your service. You probably worked the oddest hours of any committee of the House.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Oh, no.
I ended that actually 3 years ago.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. At any rate, I have no further questions with that. I'll yield back.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Ranking Member. Mr. Longworth?
Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate the fact that there is a 1/3, 2/3. When I served here before, I loved to serve on Judiciary Committee, upon which I still serve, and I recall at that time we got something like 11% of the total budget, which made it rather difficult for the minority to do its work. And I'm glad to see that over the intervening years there has been an understanding of a 1/3, 2/3. and that this is prevailing now as we come back. Some of my colleagues from California have kidded me about the fact that I was in the minority for 10 years. I left and I came back, and 2 years after I got here, we went from majority to minority again. I don't think there's a cause and effect, but I also think that there are things to be learned from that, and I think fairer treatment of the minority is important, and providing a one-third, two-third expenditure understanding, it seems to me, is important, and it is helpful to the entire constituency. So
as you know, that was a change that we made in 1994 when we came to majority status, and we felt very strongly with, as you said, that 11% number that you had as
no, rules was not as minority. Rules was better. It was 17% for rules.
Right, it was 17% for rules, but I just meant the 11% that you had on the Judiciary Committee. I think it's very important to note that, and we felt passionately about that in 1994 when we came, and I'm very happy that we're continuing with recognition of that, because as the gentleman says, it would be very unfair to treat the minority as the minority before 1994 had been treated then.
Well, the other thing is everybody has a more recent memory of being in the minority.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly
Thank you very
right.
much.
Thank you so much. Thanks to both of
Thank you
for
very
being
much, Madam
here.
Chair. Again, congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. Look forward to working with the two of you.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh. What is this group here? Uh-oh. Well, step right on up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
And thank you so much for your patience as we round up this full funding hearing starting early morning at 9:30. We appreciate the two of you coming in today, Chairman Ray Hall and Ranking Member Young, on natural resources. If you don't mind just submitting your full testimony for the record and just summarizing that you would like for the committee to have, we would appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. I'm glad to see that my ranking member took his rightful seat to my right. And ranking member, Mr. Ehlers, Mr. Lundgren, I do appreciate the opportunity for myself and my longtime colleague on both of the committees I've had the privilege of serving on in this body for 30 years, both Transportation Infrastructure and Resources. The ranking member now on Resources, Don Young. It is an opportunity to present to this committee our budget for the 110th Congress. We know it's been a long day for you, and I am going to be very brief in my comments. In total, the amount we are requesting represents only a 4% increase in 07 over the committee's budget for the second session of the 109th Congress, with an additional 4% increase, only 4% I might add, for 2008. We believe that this small increase is justifiable in light of the aggressive schedule of oversight hearings the committee intends to conduct, including in the field. In this regard, our committee does have jurisdiction over issues affecting Native Americans and the U.S. territorial possessions. Many Indian tribes remain impoverished, and territorial issues have been largely ignored over the past few years. It is our intention to bring the committee out to Indian country, to our territories, so that we can see and hear firsthand the problems they face. A brief review of the committee's oversight plan that was submitted with our budget proposal will also give you an idea of the other pressing issues the committee intends to address, both through oversight and legislation. The increase we are proposing is also aimed at allowing the committee to retain talented professional staff. On the Democratic side, I am proud to say that we have staff who started on the committee during the chairmanships of Mo Udall and subsequently George Miller. They've chosen to stay with the committee through thick and thin, I might add, and have resisted the temptations of K Street for these many years due to their dedication to public service. I do respect their loyalty, and I feel obligated to provide them with appropriate compensation. The committee has allowed 69 staffers in total. Of that number, 40 serve the majority, 20 serve the minority, and 9 are shared employees. Staffers such as the systems administrator, the chief clerk, and the chief financial officer. In this regard, 1/3 of the salary budget is controlled by the minority. The remainder of the budget, Madam Chair, items such as travel and supplies, is treated openly. By this I mean there is no distinction or prejudice between the majority and the minority. Computers, copiers, and other equipment are repaired or replaced as needed without regard to whether it's a Democrat or Republican staffer using them. The same applies with travel. That concludes my testimony, and again, I thank you for this opportunity.
I thank you so much. Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with the chairman 100%. It's the second time I've served on this committee. I'm fortunate to have a chairman on the committee that served with me for 30 years. This is a fair budget request. It is very small. I have to say, in defense of the chairman, you know, the Democrats are supposed to be the big spenders. He is not a big spender. I would have been a bigger spender. But he's done what is correct, and I do support this budget. I think it's the right thing to do. And as he said, we have a great responsibility for the land, the water, the wildlife, and the territories of the American natives of this nation. And I support the efforts that's put forth by this proposal by the chairman.
You know what? It was not until I looked at the testimonies that you both submitted that I thought, wow, what a vast, broad array of things that you do under this committee. And I think I counted about 14 hearings in California alone, or close to that. And so we're very pleased that you are seeing California as one of those states that you need to continuously come to. But then, of course, with its natural resources and other types of habitat, you would want to come there. I am very pleased with what you're doing. Regretfully to say, the committees that have come before us, all of the chairs, have been met with the notion that we only have a 2.2% increase for inflation from the baseline of last year's budget, because we did not have a budget passed last year. So we had to operate from last year's budget and then do this 2.2% increase. Could be something else that comes down the pike. I have duly noted what both of you have said in terms of the vast array of initiatives and the agenda that you have before us. And I will certainly go back to the speaker to speak with her about this. But I must tell you in all candor at this point, that's what we have for the budget. And we just appreciate your working within those constraints. Mr. Ranking Member?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to hear your testimony and to have a harmonious arrangement between the two of you. We have not had that on all committees, but I know both of you well, and particularly have worked for years with under the direction of a gentleman from Alaska, and he's always done a good job. I'm sure both of you will at this point, and it's a subject that's very dear to me. I can never serve on the committee. I have too many committees the way it is, but the environment and resources conservation are extremely important to me, and I appreciate the work that your committee does. Just one comment with respect to your jurisdiction is basically the entire planet. It's exceeded only by the Science Committee, in which I am. We have jurisdiction over the entire universe. However, it's a little more difficult to plan committee trips to examine them. I'm hoping that I might be able to take a trip to the moon as part of the committee's responsibility, but I don't expect that's going to happen in my short remaining life. On the 2/3, 1/3, which is mentioned, I just want to thank you for affirming that, because, and we're checking that with all the committees, because this is very important to this committee. We struggled for 12 years to establish that ratio, including a few recalcitrant committees, because of the history where the Republicans were denied resources, and some chairman didn't want to yield back. But we did establish it. We're determined to keep it. I very much appreciate that you have both pledged to continue that practice, and I appreciate it. With that, I have no further questions. You seem to have submitted a very fair budget, given the terrible constraints we're working on this year. We hope that if we have a good appropriations bill this year, that things might look a little better next year, but we have no idea if they will. So thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your good work, and make sure that committee keeps running smoothly.
Thank you
very much.
Mr. Longworth?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank both of you for coming. I have always enjoyed working with both of you, and Madam Chair, it is appropriate that in today's hearings we started with the Foreign Affairs Committee with Mr. Lantos, who is not a native Californian but became a Californian, and we end with Mr. Young, who is a native Californian, but who sought fame and fortune in the largest state in the Union, Alaska. But he does return to California from time to time, and somehow his alma mater, Chico State, decided that they would recognize him as the outstanding graduate. And as long as we keep quiet about some of the things he's done here, I think they will not remove that title from him. So we appreciate him being here. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the compliment.
You can tell how dearly beloved you are in the Congress.
Well, I thank you both so much, and again, thanks for your patience and thanks for your sensitivity to the constraints that we find ourselves in terms of this budget. Certainly, if anything else should come, you'll be the first to know that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Well, committee chair, ranking member, and members, you have been absolutely incredibly outstanding today. We have seen them all today. We knew that it was going to be ambitious, and indeed it was, but you stuck right with us on that. And I would like to thank you both for being right here until the end, and would like to thank those who did come and had to leave because of other committee commitments. Mr. Ellis, would you like to make a statement before we close?
Yes, thank you for your patience and your service on this important day. And I believe this is the first time in my experience, that we've done it in one day, and the first time that the chair and the ranking member remained in the meeting the entire day, with a few excursions now and then. I'm very pleased that we were able to finish this up, and hope we can soon mark it up and get it through the Congress.
Well, we knew, Mr. Ranking Member, that we were going to be historic in our teamwork, and so we are. We thank you so much for being around with us. The committee will convene on tomorrow for markup, and that's around 4:00 p.m. And we just ask your indulgence for one more day so that we can get this through and get it done. And with reference to, there is one committee that perhaps the budget has not been cleared by the committee. I would simply say that I will call those two, the chair and the ranking member, and ask if they want the choice of perhaps going to the floor to speak on their budget, or wait until March 31st when the CR is up again for reauthorization, and they will again come before this committee. Certainly have thrown that out there with you by unanimous consent. If you tend to agree with that, I will go forward with that proposal.
I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss that. I don't have any problem in principle, but
sure.
I'm sure we can agree before tonight.
Absolutely, and we will indeed do that. If nothing else is to come before this committee, thank you all. Committee adjourned.